All right, everybody, how you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee, live here over on Stereo. Really appreciate the people on Stereo waiting until the show begins. Also live over on Twitter Spaces, where I'm joined by patreon.com/NEWZ Debate supporter, Apostate Nate. Nate, can you unmute yourself and say hello? Might have an issue over on Twitter Spaces. 1 second, everybody. All right, I think Twitter Spaces is working.
I can hear you
Oh,
now.
there you are, Apostate Nate. Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, good. Yeah, and sorry about being a little bit late here. I have almost violent sleeping habits. Okay, I think it's a combination of my actual PTSD, and maybe even like sleep apnea or something. Because I'll knock everything over. My sheet will be completely off the bed. The pillowcase is off. I've literally knocked everything off my side table. Um, Multiple occasions. One time, I punched my girlfriend in the face. Um, while I was sleeping. Not on purpose, of course. Wouldn't quite call it a punch, but my phone ended up underneath my bed, sort of directly underneath my back where I would have been sleeping. I was confused. I couldn't find my phone. I have no idea how it managed to get there because it would have to take a lot of crazy turns, but I'm here. I have my phone. Um, anyway, how's it going, Lee? Hope your day's going smoother than mine.
Yeah, not too bad. Good to have you. Sorry to hear of your sleep troubles. I'm going to try to find you some advice here from a unlikely ally. Let's see if we can bring that up now. My constant co-host on this show is fake Donald Trump. Mr. President, my friend moves a lot when he sleeps. Do you have any advice for him?
That's not really a question I can answer. It's just a part of his personality. It's not like he can just stop moving. It's not like he's doing it on purpose.
Well, sorry, Apostate Nate. I guess there's no help for you. President Trump is really busy taking over D.C., meeting with Vladimir Putin. He just doesn't have any advice for you. Have you talked to a doctor about this? I'm not telling you to go on sleep medication, but I guess that's an option.
Oh, Lee, the adventures never end. It's gotten so bad that I've actually thought about writing a children's book about what my pillowcase and my sheet are up to when I'm asleep because they're never in the right place when I wake up, and they should be. So I was talking to my kids about it, and I'm like, what if my pillowcase and my sheet like went on adventures, when I'm sleeping to save the world, and that's why they can't quite get back. the way that I put them. Could this be my billion-dollar idea, Lee? I would vanish to an island and you would never hear from me again.
I think the real interesting part is you have to. This is a great idea, by the way. Fantastic billion-dollar idea. It's the next Harry Potter franchise. You got to come up with a clever name for your pillow and your blanket. So blanky and pillowy. I don't know. We got to work on that. Maybe fake Donald Trump has some ideas, but put this in the bank. This is a really good idea. But going back to Donald Trump, so some topics I want to cover today. Now, it's news debate, so you can bring up anything that you want. And we do have a message from MX Phillips. How you doing, MX? Over on Stereo. We'll get to that in a moment. But Donald Trump has taken over D.C. There have been some updates there. It's not as much as he wanted, but pretty much has taken over D.C. Also, Democrats fled the state of Texas to prevent them from gerrymandering the state even more, to elect more Republicans to Congress. What's interesting, we could get into this as well. California is trying to do the opposite. They're trying to gerrymander their state to send even more Democrats to Congress. So I guess it's hard to criticize one without criticizing the other. So if you don't think there's a problem in Texas, I'm a little confused how you think there could be a problem in California. You could criticize both. Maybe, and I'm leaning towards this, maybe we just don't care anymore. And if a party has enough power in a state to really change the electorate map in order to favor them, well, if they have the power to do that, maybe we take the gloves off. Biden pardoned 19 million people, so Trump's going to do even more. I'm blaming Biden for that. Trump might have done this anyways, but certainly Biden made it more possible. So maybe we just don't care about the electoral map at the state level, and maybe we just don't care about pardons anymore. And we just say whoever is in power, they can do it. Yes, Apostate Nate. I'm going to go back to Apostate Nate. He's a great guy, great friend, and supporter on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. So he's my constant co-host. Back to you.
I'm something, Lee. I'm at least a Patreon supporter. Look, when I think of gerrymandering, and I've been on both sides of the political aisle. I've been in the middle. I've sort of been everywhere at one point. Everybody does it, Lee. Everybody gerrymanders. It's the Spider-Man meme with all the political parties pointing at each other, and they all do it. If there's one complaint I take with a big yawn, it's gerrymandering.
So at this point, you're fine with whatever happens in Texas. You're fine with whatever happens in California. And if anything, maybe they cancel each other out.
I would say resigned to it. I wouldn't say I'm fine with it. I accept it as a fact of reality. No, I mean, I think gerrymandering is kind of an assy thing to do. Pardon the French, but I accept it. I don't think it's going away. I think both major parties are going to do it when they can, and I would not expect otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think maybe that's just the way to go about it. And if it's more of a split state where they can actually do something about it, Republicans or Democrats, probably the Democrats usually trying to stop Republicans from sending more people to Congress, I would say inappropriately. But if they can do something about it other than fleeing the state, okay, go ahead and try to do that. But yeah, I got a problem with what the Democrats did in Texas. And I definitely have a problem with Republicans kind of forcing them to flee the state, and then the same thing in California. But I don't think Republicans have tried to flee California. Let's jump over here. I have no transcript, so we're just shooting from the hip right now. Let's hear from MX Phillips on Stereo.
To be honest, this whole Epstein files thing, I don't think any government or any president is at fault. I feel like each party is waiting till the other party becomes in power so that they can use this as a weapon against them. Because Why didn't Biden release it? But for some reason, it's now Trump's problem.
So I believe MX was discussing this on the last show a little bit more than a week ago. And we had a really nice discussion. So go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate, bit.ly/NEWZ debate, news debate. You can check out my Twitch. Oh, I don't know if the Twitch episode's up there. I think they go after 7 days, but you can go to my Rumble account. Links on bit.ly/news debate, or go to Rumble and type in NEWZ debate. We did a really long show. I think we kind of did it justice. I don't believe there are any updates really that change anything that was said on that show. So really quickly, my criticism of what we just heard in MX, really appreciate the message. Feel free to send some more. Anyone else over on Stereo, do the same. It's not Trump's problem because he's the president now, and no one was really pressuring Biden to release the files. He certainly wasn't saying he was going to. And Trump said it over and over and over again, including when he became president for the second time here. So I just disagree with your whole situation. I just don't think it makes any sense. If Trump didn't talk about it and then all of a sudden people were like, oh, we need these files, that would be a different situation. But he talked about it. Pam Bondi said she had the list on her desk, and then all of a sudden there wasn't a list. So if you have something else to say, we can continue the conversation. But if it's just that same old argument, I just think we need to move on, because I don't think you're correctly describing the situation, and therefore I don't have much of an answer, but I appreciate you. Over on Twitter Spaces, we got some more people joining. Feel free to request to speak. Okay. So I'm going to share this over on my screen, so you can watch this live right now on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate, also on Rumble. All those links available at bit.ly/news debate. This is from the BBC. I love reading from foreign news entities about the United States. I think it's really interesting to see how they report it. So the Trump administration has rescinded an order replacing the District of Columbia, so Washington, D.C.'s police chief, after an emergency court hearing. Washington's police chief, Pamela Smith, oh, it's a lady, will retain control of the force after the city sued over U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's naming the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, as the district's emergency police commissioner. The lawsuit asked for that to not take place. After the hearing, the Justice Department did agree to remove the DEA head as the emergency police chief and filed a new order that made him an intermediary between the administration and the police. So now it's a middleman situation. A judge says that under the act the Trump administration used to take over the police service, which just happened, the mayor of D.C. must follow White House directives. However, the judge said it does not grant the Trump administration full control of the police force. So I guess that's a silver lining, but I think legally, basically, they have the ability to go in there and kind of do what they want. The new order also directs the mayor's office to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, ICE, as well as enforcement related to the unlawful occupancy of public spaces. I mean, just like any major city in the United States, DC has a homeless problem. I don't know of anything specifically that makes DC worse than many other major cities, but it's true that it does. And public spaces often are taken over by people who don't have other places to go. And we can have compassion for that. But once again, a park is not a sleeping place. A library is not for homeless people to hang out. If they're reading, I guess that's fine, because that's literally what the library is for. But I've talked about it on the show before. I've been in a major city many years ago, and I had to leave the library because the homeless people were uncomfortably odorous. And I have a problem with that. If you're presence somewhere makes it uncomfortable for other people who are using the library for more of a legitimate purpose, didn't see a lot of these homeless people reading novels, then I think there needs to be a conversation and there needs to be some action tied to that. Once again, I want cities to have outreach and programs available for people who are living on the streets. I absolutely want that. But it doesn't need to be, we can't use parks anymore. Many cities in the United States, I've seen people doing needle drugs in parks, smoking what did not appear to be marijuana, and I think that's a problem. So generally, and Apostate Nate, let me know what you think about this. Anyone over on Stereo, let me know what you think. Um, I think Washington D.C. should be run by the federal government. It is the capital. There are other countries where the capital is its own state. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's controlled by the federal government in that country, but DC is this weird in between, and I think the federal government is right for any administration to take it over. I think that makes sense. I think that's how it should have always been. I don't like that people live in Washington D.C. I think that should be, at this point, there's probably not much you can do, but I think in a perfect situation that should be really limited. It should be the federal house of government, and people can live in the surrounding states. Now, once again, we've kind of, that ship has set sail. But you can find multiple countries out there where there's more of a separation between the area that's known as their federal capital and the states, provinces around them than we have now. If DC was able to become part of Maryland or something, I would also be interested in that. I would prefer, however, for it to be something separate that's run by the federal government. I think that makes sense just in general, and especially now with the way that security and the fact that we had the attack on the Capitol. Not that Trump is necessarily going to prevent that from happening again, but I hope I'm making the case here that I don't have a problem with any president trying to federalize Washington, D.C., because that's the one place they should do that. What do you think about that, Apostate Nate?
I think that makes sense. What complicates it for me, and I suspect it complicates it for you, is that you do have a lot of private citizens living in D.C., and even though it is the federal hub, I do think that makes a federal militarization a little creepy with so many private citizens living there. I worry about Trump getting a taste for that type of power and control and wanting to expand that elsewhere. So I think you're onto something when you talk about DC. Like, why not? It's flipping Washington DC. I just think there are some mitigating factors there that have me a little nervous. That's all.
So how would you prefer to have this happen? Let's say the National Guard was not involved and the Trump administration can just federalize the police. And even if that just means that they are the bosses of every police officer in Washington, D.C., it's maybe the same effect, but it's a different path to get there.
That's a good question, Lee. I honestly feel like giving you a really solid answer on that is above my pay grade. I've just never really thought about the relationship between, say, city planning and law enforcement that closely. I will say that there's something, and I get why it happens. I do. But there's something about me that when I see footage of like a homeless camp being destroyed, I think to myself, and I think about the homeless, and I'm like, are we just telling them to drop dead at that point? I don't know.
I mean, in the United States, we basically are, because there's not enough help in major cities, let alone across the entire country. There's some rural homelessness, but it does seem to be pooled in major cities across the country, especially, a short list of those cities. We are basically telling them to just figure it out on their own. And so that's why I won't give Trump or any other hypothetical president an issue with that, because they've done that across the country in democratically run cities and Republican run cities. In fact, I think we've looked at some of the numbers closer on previous shows. The cities that have the worst homeless crises are the ones that are run by Democrats. I feel like that might be a self-fulfilling prophecy as opposed to a causal relationship. But whether
Yeah,
or
I
not
can
it's the
see that.
chicken
That's
or
a good
the
phrase
egg, that
for it.
does seem to be the case. Yeah, sorry, back to you, Nate.
No, I was just going to say that I agree with the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy here. I think that has it right. I mean, look, Lee, sometimes we encounter problems and we expect answers because we live in there's an app for everything era. There's no app for the homeless crisis, Lee. I mean, I remember when I visited Los Angeles on a
And
trip
that's
with
a
my
really funny
ex-wife.
thing. Let's talk about that
Yeah.
for a second, because if there was an app for homelessness, they would be the one of the worst possible demographics to tie to an app, because they'll have to go somewhere to charge it. Are they able to pay for cell phone service? Like, what kind of free Wi-Fi do they get? So even if there was an app that in every major city across the country, if you logged in and made an account, you could get somewhere to stay and you could get mental health and substance abuse problems and all these other things you need, food. Um, it's not like that would work because people are homeless.
Lee, it's a tough situation, especially when you see it up close. I mean, I was practically stepping over humans on the streets of Hollywood when I was there a few years ago. I
Yeah, the
routinely
LA
and
metro is a really bad hotspot. California
it really
is
is.
prime destination for homelessness. People will go to California. That's been proven. But also people will go to California because California is cool and it's got Hollywood, like you just mentioned, and then they will fail. The vast majority of people who try to make it will fail, and that will turn into homelessness. So, I think it's the chicken and the egg. People go to California when they're homeless, just like people, if they can get to Hawaii, we've talked about it on the show previously, that's a prime destination for homelessness. You got to get there. In fact, Hawaii, if I remember correctly, we've talked on previous shows, actually will send people back to the mainland. They have to agree to it, but they'll send them back for free. And we've talked about cities are busing homeless to other places. And I think Texas was busing homeless people to New York some time ago. And I thought that was hilarious because it was like, well, it's perfectly legal. They agree to it and they get a free ticket. Like, what are you going to do? And New York has its own, homeless crises. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a bad situation. I was sort of just talking about, in theory, an app. I'm not asking for an app to solve homelessness, and you weren't asking for that either. But there are no good answers in the United States. And you and I, Nate, and everybody else on the show who's a regular peer, makes a regular appearance, we've talked about, in the United States, we just will never have the social services that we require to really put a dent in homelessness, let alone solve the homelessness crises. And the only situation we can get, I'm 100% for. You shouldn't be sleeping / living in a park. Shouldn't be doing drugs in open public. You shouldn't be defecating on the street. You shouldn't put up a tent on public property in front of businesses in parks and live there. I still think I have compassion for people that are in that situation, but that doesn't mean that I want to ruin it for everyone else. I want libraries, I want parks, I want places you can go, and I think I can still have compassion. So, yeah, there's not a good answer, right? Not in the United States. We'll never get there. It's like gun violence. Whether or not people think it's a mental health issue, which I think is bullshit, and people know it's bullshit and they're lying when they say that they absolutely believe it's about mental health. That's a component, but it's about the guns. We've talked about it on the show. When it's harder to get a gun in a state, you have less gun deaths, including suicide. That's just, it's a fact. It's what the numbers say, but we're never going to do anything about it because it's the United States. So to go back to homelessness, Nate, what do? Do we just tell people to deal with it?
I think my solution to that, and boy, I don't really think this is a good or an elegant solution, is I think when it comes to public spaces, if they're not setting up camps, they're like literally like blocking a business. If they're setting up places to just sleep, like a little green by an overpass or something, I think to a certain extent, and we have to start looking the other way when we can at stuff like that, because we don't have any kind of real safety net for these individuals. And even though I don't like, I don't like a world, where people are crapping in the park, using drugs in the park and things like that. I don't know that that means that every tent is in a terrible place, that every camp is in a terrible place. And even so, to a certain extent, Lee, again, with the lack of a safety net, I am going to, and I'm not going to like it, but I'm probably going to look the other way if I'm running a city as much as I can look away.
Yeah, and that's the really hard part, is as much as I can look away, or as much as a city can look away, because when you're in front of businesses, when you're in major thoroughfares of a metro, can't look away. I don't think they ever should have. And their hearts were in the right place. It's like the really liberal places in America that had such big COVID restrictions, they thought they were doing the right thing. We know that lockdowns were a big mistake. We know that not sending kids to school was a big mistake. And hopefully, if it happens again, which it certainly could, especially because it came from a goddamn lab in China, like that's not a conspiracy theory anymore. That's a legitimate, real theory. And I guarantee that's what happened. Talked about that on the show before. We don't have to bring that up right now unless people want to
Lee,
talk about it.
wasn't that same lab caught trying to weaponize other viruses and so forth? I think it was the same lab that was in some hot water years ago.
Could have been. I don't recall that. Specifically, what I recall is that they've never given us data from the lab. China has just refused over and over again. It can't be a coincidence that there's a giant coronavirus, not that one specifically, but coronavirus research facility in the same city where the outbreak happened. Yes, they did have the live pups and bats meat market thing, and that has been a case of some outbreaks in the past. But they also had an outbreak before even China was thinking there was an outbreak. They had some sort of outbreak at the lab. They shut it down. They locked it down. They sent several lab staff people to the hospital. This is verified. This is real, and it happened right before shit hit the fan. So there's just so many things. If this was a court hearing, if there was ever going to be a conviction on who was to blame for COVID, that would be the one that would be the closest victory. Now, it's hard because we don't know, but like, come on, everybody. So we were giving money to them, and then Fauci and other people said that, oh, it wasn't being used for this. It turned out that was not true. Whether or not they knew what they were saying was wrong, it turned out that was not true. They could not say what the money was absolutely being used for. And in fact, if I remember correctly, there was some evidence that the money definitely could have been traced to other things, sort of like a blank check. You're not sure what they're going to do, but we had some indications. And the whole idea of gain of function research, so you get ahead of the viruses, makes sense in theory, but I don't know if we should be doing that anymore. And certainly we shouldn't be giving money to any Chinese facility ever again, or any other facility outside the United States, because we just don't have boots on the ground there. It just doesn't make sense to me at all, even before the pandemic, and now after the pandemic, I think it certainly doesn't make sense. But to go back to Washington, D.C., and talking about homelessness, which is one part of the reason the Trump administration said they were going to go in there and federalize. Everybody on stereo, give me some voice messages. Let me know what you think. Apostate Nate, we're continuing to talk when you hear your thoughts. If we talk just specifically about homelessness, DC is a hard area. It's not, it's not Wisconsin. It's not Milwaukee. It's kind of hard to imagine people camped out by a river and not affecting people. But if we go away from major thoroughfares and we say, if there's just a homeless camp that has popped up and they're not bothering anybody, let's look the other way. I think it's possible to maybe do that, especially at first. But the more that people look away and allow that to happen, the bigger that encampment gets. And there's always going to be lawlessness because they're away from society, like they're just out in the middle of nowhere. even if they're close to a metro, they're away from that metro, or they found some sort of, forest oasis, river oasis inside the metro that no one's using.
This is why I don't like my answer, Lee. It's
Yeah,
my
no,
answer,
exactly.
but I don't really
We're
like it.
looking for the best possible answer when there's not any good ones. So I'm not faulting your attempt here, because I think it's a good one. But you're going to have lawlessness. I mean, we've talked about it on the show before. Anecdotal information, but people get murdered. People are still doing drugs there. There's rapes, things like that. I'm not saying it's happening every moment of every day, but those reports come out. And then you just have public health, you have public safety. So, there's not showers out there, there's not bathrooms out there. So, are they crapping in a river? That's going to lead to some negative consequences. If there's just human waste everywhere, that's not a good situation to be in. And so it creates these situations that over time, even if at first we could say we're going to look the other way, we're not going to say this is legal, but we're going to look the other way, eventually it'll snowball into something you'll have to tear it down. Like that's just happened across the country, and I think logically we can see how that plays out. So then what you have is you have like a leapfrog situation. So let's say it's a year, just to do some easy math. They can stay there for a year, but then these problems creep up and they say, okay, can't do it anymore. So they have to shut it down. So where do all these people go? Well, they probably scatter, and then after a while they find another place. And then they can stay there a year, and it builds up, and a lot of people are there, and then all these problems creep up again, and you got to do it again. So even this Band-Aid, it's a really good idea. It clearly doesn't last too long, because all of these issues start to pop up. So it goes back to what you said earlier, Apostate Nate. I really think whether or not we're telling homeless people to die, we really are just in the United States telling homeless people that we don't care and they have to figure it out for themselves, because we're never going to have the social safety net structure to really help these people. And to go back to kind of my prime argument here is, I don't want them taking over public spaces. I want libraries and parks to be for the general public to use in the fashion they were designed. And that means we just kind of don't care about homelessness, and we kind of are not allowed to care about homelessness. And it's not a good situation. It's not even probably technically a solution, but I think it's the way we have to go, because we've seen what happens when we try the other avenues and they just don't work out. So my argument now is that I think we just don't care, and people have to figure it out for themselves. And especially if children are involved, maybe we can have what little amount of funding and what a little few resources we have for them. But for adults, you got to figure it out, because that's how the United States works. I'm not saying I want it to work that way, but that's how it works. What do you think, Nate? And people over on stereo, hey, Miss Smitty, go ahead and leave voice messages.
Lee, I think you're describing a cycle that, as far as things go right now, is inevitable. I think that cycle is what it is. And I am personally glad, after this chapter in our discussion, that I am not in charge of the homeless crisis, because I am not qualified to solve it.
Well, even people who are qualified to solve it, if you will not have any more answers than we've just sort of arrived at now. So bring this back to D.C. One of the components of why Trump said he wanted to federalize D.C., moved in National Guard. You can see the pictures. And now the courts say, judge has just ruled that while the Trump administration does not have complete control over D.C., the D.C. police forces have to follow their commands. So the other side of this is crime. Let's move over to crime in a moment. This is from the BBC. I'm going to continue reading. President Donald Trump on Monday declared he would use federal law enforcement to crack down on crime in Washington. He has since sent in hundreds of National Guard members and other federal agents to clear homelessness encampments, run checkpoints, and otherwise bolster law enforcement, citing a 1970s law known as the Home Rule Act, which allows him to use MPD for federal purposes that he may deem necessary and appropriate. Last Thursday, Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote in an order that the DEA would assume all of the powers and duties of the local police chief. As we mentioned earlier in the show, a judge has said that the police chief has to stay, so they've now appointed a DEA person, if I remember correctly, to be an intermediary. So the police chief has to then report to the DEA. The DEA will then report to the White House, and the police chief, the police in Washington D.C. Have to follow the orders they are given. In the last few days, armored vehicles have lined up near monuments and other tourist sites, and drivers have been stopped on a popular nightlife corridor. Helicopters from the police force for the National Park System have swept through the sky in the capital. Altogether, officials expect 800 troops to be deployed to the capital, as well as 500 federal law enforcement agents, such as the FBI. Trump is reportedly the first president to federalize the police in the Capitol, but the government has sought to intervene in D.C. policing before. In 1989, the original President George Bush provided around 200 National Guard troops to support local police during a period of chronically high crime involving crack cocaine, with the understanding they would not patrol the streets. More recently, the National Guard was sent to protect the Capitol after the January 6th attack in 2021. And before that, in response to the 2020 protests following the killing of George Floyd. On X, Pam Bondi tweeted that federal officers, as of Friday, had made 189 arrests, including 39 on gun offenses. President Trump has said crime has worsened in Washington, D.C., but an analysis by BBC suggests a different trend. And I've seen this in the news. He says the crime is worse. It's actually gotten better, but I wouldn't say it's good. I think it's just gotten better when you look at recent crime statistics. Violent offenses fell after peaking in 2023. And in 2024, they hit their lowest level in 30 years, according to figures published by the Washington, D.C. police force. Preliminary data for this year, 2025, shows they are continuing to fall. Violent crime overall has fallen 26% this year compared to the same point last year, and robbery is down 28%. Since taking office, as we have discussed on the show, Trump has also deployed National Guard troops to Los Angeles. That was related to protests over ICE enforcement. So, Nate, yeah, your hand is up over on Twitter Spaces. Everybody over on Stereo, continue to give us some messages. Yes, Nate.
Lee, do you think that Trump's deployment in LA, DC, and heck, I'm even going to throw in the stealth bomber flyover from yesterday in Alaska. You think part of it, is that he's got some infatuation with dictators and the grandiose ways that they rattle their swords and display power? What say you, Lee?
I would say more the military parade in DC is directly connected to that. But the way he's going about this is certainly Trump-like. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. But I think any strong, I don't give a fuck Republican president could do this. Just the way he's gone about it is definitely an indication that it's Donald Trump. But once again, to go back to my overall point from the beginning of the show, I am fine with any president, Democrat or Republican, whoever could get in the White House, which in our lifetime is those two parties, taking over DC. DC either needs to be a federally run area or it needs to be folded into Maryland or something else. And it makes 100% sense in my mind. And you can find other examples of this of abroad where countries have their capital as a separate district, which, okay, we do. DC is not part of any state, but it's a federal district. It's a federal state. And that sort of label, that sort of power, from what I understand, is something you can find abroad in other countries. So I don't have a problem with this. We'll have to see what the courts say, but it looks like thus far it's legal. Um, which unfortunately is a lot of things Trump is doing. They turn out to be legal. It's just no other president had the cojones, the fu to everybody else power in order to do it. And what a shame that Obama didn't do this for liberal causes. What a shame that Biden didn't do this for liberal causes. I'm so jealous that Republicans get to vote for someone who does so many things. I wish I could vote for a Democrat who did half as many things. Holy cow, look at the progress we could make on social services and so many other things in the United States if we had a Democrat who didn't give a shit. But we don't. We don't get that. That's not how it works here. I'd love to hear what you guys think over on stereo. Leave me some voice messages. I'll play them right now. Apostate Nate is joining me over on Twitter Spaces. He's my supporter over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate, as well as Mr. Beanie, also known as Better Vibes. Lola, Shannon, Sneaky Elbow, Ron, MC Funk, Bjorn. Also, let's give a round of applause in support of Shannon. I'm not sure if Shannon is going to be able to join us today, but I didn't hear from her for a long time, which unfortunately has happened in the past with Shannon, and it's always tied to some sort of health crisis. She didn't have a heart attack, but she had something like similar to that, and she is now in a care facility. And so she gave me an update. I didn't hear from her for like 2 weeks or more, something like that. And this is similar to some things that have happened to her in the last couple of years while she's been a part of the Newz debate community and one of my supporters on Patreon. We love hearing from Shannon. I'd love to hear from her today and get an update. Not sure if she will, but she is still kicking and feisty and everything else. So we wish her the best. Apostate Nate, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, Lee, but I was just about to tell you that I had located Shannon in a space because you were worried, and then you beat me to the punch. So I was just going to let you know I thought seems okay.
Yeah, I saw that because I get notifications when the people I follow and the people I engage with on Twitter are in other spaces, such as yourself and Shannon and Ron. Yeah, I started seeing those again. And so, yeah, thank you for that update. So once again, she seems to be back to her normal self, getting out there and trolling MAGA supporters. Would love to have her on the show today. I'm not sure if she can make it at this time on this day, but hopefully we'll have her on the show again in the future. And it's always really interesting to hear her updates. Her updates have been everything from I had a heart attack to I fell and really hurt myself. Other times she just has gotten sick without a specific, stereotypical fell, had a heart attack, diagnosed with this, that, or the other. She's just gotten sick and had to go to the hospital for long periods of time. So, yeah, we wish her all the best. I absolutely think she'll be back on the show again like she always is. She always seems to pull through, but we'll just wait until we hear from her. We got a lot of people over on stereo. Would love to hear from you guys. Go ahead and leave me a voice message. We've been talking about Trump's federal takeover, which appears thus far to be legal. There are a few caveats there, but generally he has the power to do it. I absolutely am fine with it. I'd love to see DC solidified a bit more and exactly what it is and who's in control. And I hope that continues on, whoever becomes president, because the Capitol was designed from the get-go. It was a designed city back in the day. They took land and they said, this is going to be the Capitol. And I feel like they just didn't cross all their T's and dot all their I's. And if it takes Trump to do that, so be it. But clearly what's been going on in D.C. has not worked. The original President Bush was at the end of the 80s, had to send National Guard there. We sent National Guard during the George Floyd riots, if I remember correctly, that we just read a moment ago. And now we're doing it again. Let's just solidify it. So maybe the National Guard's always there. Maybe there's always military there. Maybe it's just that the police forces of Washington, D.C. have to answer to the president. I think we need a little bit more there than what we have now. It does not mean I agree with Trump and the way he's doing it, but in theory, I'm totally fine with the president saying the D.C. police force, Washington, D.C. is under White House control. That makes 100% sense to me. I'd love to hear from other people who disagree, who agree. Let me know your thoughts. Something else I also wanted to cover was the gerrymandering that's going on in Texas by the Republicans, with the Democrats fleeing the state, as well as the gerrymandering that continues to move forward in California as kind of a reaction to what's happening in Texas and what people think about that. We talked about that with Apostate Nate a little bit earlier, but we haven't quite um, done the full story yet. Let me see. Is there anything more from DC that we need to talk about? That might be it. Otherwise, we can move over to gerrymandering, unless Apostate Nate, you always have some good topics. Anything else that you specifically want to bring up?
At a certain point, Lee, I wanted to briefly touch upon the SNAP benefits and HHS saying, no more soda and candy for you. We can get to that whenever. I'm not gonna
No, sure. Let's
shoehorn
do that
anything.
now, because we've been talking about homelessness, and that's a really interesting topic we've covered on the show before. What do you think? So, was it part of the? Let me think here. So, the big beautiful bill included a lot of cuts to social services like Medicaid, and then specific states. I think it might have been Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken, that had moved towards you have to work for state benefits, because I think Medicaid is always run through the state, um, even though it has federal provisions. And then maybe some other state, if not Nebraska, was also doing something with soda, or maybe it was soda and not working. But states are getting waivers. I believe they're referred to as waivers to institute these sort of restrictions. And it's very interesting. Cannon fodder for discussion. What do you think about it, Nate?
Oh, in theory, it's hard for me to say you can take your government benefits and go buy a cake with it. Um, in practice, I find this problematic for a few reasons. Probably the biggest reason is that so much of the food in our grocery stores is just filled with patently unhealthy stuff. I mean, there's high fructose corn syrup in just about everything. For example, you can take a loaf of store bought bread and find ingredients in that. You have TV dinners, which are probably SNAP friendly, and TV dinners are notoriously bad for you. There's so
TV
much
dinners
food,
are more American than a
right?
hamburger. I mean, that is so American.
Yeah, it's the American like we want everything instant. So the the big problem I see is drawing a reasonable line between these, because again, um, it's not always about what you're eating. There's a saying in science that goes, the dose makes the poison. Okay. If you're actually having half a cup to a cup of ice cream and that's it a few nights a week, that is not the type of sugar consumption that is, outrageous, that's going to barrel you towards health conditions that you don't want for most people. Okay. Again, the dose makes the
So,
poison.
are you talking about we should allow junk food and soda, but there should be limits?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some allotment for that, Lee. And that leads me to my second reason. Is I just imagine some like kid at the lunch table at school watching the kids around him drink a soda, but he's too poor for a soda, and the government has also said no. I'm not okay with that, Lee. I'm just not. I mean, that might be emotion over logic,
Wait,
and
are
for
you
that
are you
case,
talking
I
about
really
kids saying like, "Hey, Billy, poor Billy," or let's say Peter, poor Peter, how'd you get that soda? Like, are you talking about that?
I'm just talking about the fact that I feel for the kid who doesn't have a soda, and even his government benefits won't pay for like him to have like a few sodas a week. Like to me, that's just insane. I don't know, especially since so much of the food
I
is
would say in like Scandinavia, that's something we can discuss. But once again, when social services in the United States are so low and so unavailable, like I don't even know. I'm not attacking you here, but I don't even know if like that's a factor we should be discussing. Does that make sense?
I think it's probably less important than determining the quality of the food, which is my biggest hang up. I think it's hard to have all those hard and fast rules when so much of what's on those SNAP benefits is patently unhealthy. I think that would be my main case. But there is an emotional case for me too. I do think it's less important. And I do think you have a point when social services in this country are so thin and they're so strained. Um, I'm just not going to be the one that tells somebody on SNAP benefits that they're too poor for a bag of chips and a soda. I'm just not going to do that. To me, that's just a little bit too much.
Well, let me take up that mantle then, because I will. I will tell people that I'm sorry you were born in the United States, or a lot of people who came here and are getting public benefits. You shouldn't be able to buy those things. Now, if it's at school, that's different because you have free and reduced lunch programs, and the food we give kids in school is terrible. In fact, you probably might get a bag of chips at a school, just part of lunch. So that's a different discussion. But if you're buying things with SNAP benefits and bringing them to school, or if somehow you can use them at the school, no, I will be the person to tell them, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. And in fact, I would support you not being able to
I
do
will
that.
gladly hand
Um,
that task over to you, Lee. No complaints. It is all yours, my pal.
yeah, I mean, it's not important to me, but I'll definitely go out on a limb and say, yeah, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. Really quickly, I forgot. I asked President Trump, what's your solution to the homeless crisis across the United States? Let's hear from fake Donald Trump here on News Debate.
Well, the first step is to address the root cause. We need to focus on providing people with the resources they need to get back on their feet. That means providing job training, affordable housing, and access to health care. We also need to make sure that people have access to mental health services and support. Finally, we need to work on reducing the stigma associated with homelessness and make sure that people are treated with dignity and respect.
Holy cow. That's more of an adult answer than I would expect, even from a fake Donald Trump.
Where did that come
The
from?
problem with that, I would say, I'm sorry?
I said, where did that come from? Are you sure that's even
Yeah, where
fake,
did that?
Donald
He
Trump?
must have been reading off a note card. But even his reading of the note card was quite excellent for Donald Trump. The problem with that, let's look back at this, is to address the root cause. We need to focus on providing people resources, job training, affordable housing, access to healthcare. The problem with the United States is that that's most Americans: job training, affordable housing, access to healthcare, access to mental health services and support. That's like the majority of Americans, or like such a large number, whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. It's such a large segment of the American demographic. That's not something specifically for homelessness. That's something that Americans need. That's something that every other industrialized rich country out there offers its citizens that we don't. So while it's a good answer, and once again, hey, wow, Donald Trump every once in a while hits it out of the ballpark. Fake Donald Trump. I don't have the real president on the show, unfortunately. That's not an answer. And then secondly, it's not an answer because it's never going to happen. So I guess I don't think I'll get this answer from fake Donald Trump, but I would say what's a reasonable answer for the homeless crisis in the United States, given that the United States is what it is. Most Americans don't have access to those things, and we're certainly not going to give that to homeless people. It would be great if we could, and maybe that would solve homelessness overall in the United States, but pipe dream. It's not going to happen. We got a full house over on stereo. I'd love to hear from you guys. Go ahead and leave us some voice messages. Right now, our poll is a little more than 50% of people. So, slight majority of people over on stereo say that Trump was justified to take over DC. A large minority of people said it was illegal for the president to take control over DC the way he just did in the last week or so. stereo, you can have some skewed results. We know over on the mean streets of stereo, as they say, you get some opinionated people, so it's kind of hard to judge any poll that I run on the show. But yeah, that's interesting. A little more than half of people are supporting President Trump's seizure of control over DC. I voted for that. I absolutely think the president should have a larger stake in what happens in DC, including the police force. And as we know, the president has the right to send National Guard troops around the country. It's happened before Trump. It'll probably happen more with Trump, I'm guessing. So I can't fault him in theory for that either. Makes a lot of sense to me. I'd love for him to take over DC without involving the military, but if the shoe fits, we'll of course have to see how this plays out in the coming weeks and months, both in the courts and on the ground in DC. And while it is true to say that crime statistics in DC have gotten better, they've gone down. In fact, we read something about a specific statistic is at a 30-year low in DC. I don't think DC is particularly free of crime. So we can point to statistics, and I always talk about that on the show. It matters, but especially in major American cities, to say that the crime is going down is not necessarily worthy of an award in my book. Let me know if you think differently or if you agree over on Stereo or over on Twitter Spaces. Let's jump now maybe to what's going on in Texas and California. I'm over on The Hill right now. Good website. And The Hill, unlike the BBC, allows you to listen to the audio version of the article. So let's give that a try. Talking now about what's happening over in Texas. And perhaps we'll also get to California, because I think they're basically the same story. It's a very big story that spans 2 states. And of course, gerrymandering has happened in our lifetime many places and will continue to happen. But these are the real 2 epicenters of what's going on. Let's take a listen to The Hill. Or not. Why is that not working? Maybe I'll just read The Hill. Way to go, Lee. Oh, I had it working before. I was really excited about this. Oh, I think I know what I have to do. Give me a moment. All right, let's try it now.
Texas Democrats poised to end standoff. 5 Things to Know by Caroline Vackel and Julia Mueller. Texas House Democrats, who fled the state to stall a Republican redistricting plan, have signaled they are ready to return to the Lone Star State in the coming days. The Texas state legislature wrapped up its first special session on Friday, one of the conditions the Democrats gave for ending their quorum break. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, quickly called a second special session, with Democrats' anticipated return set to clear the way for the Texas House to move forward with an aggressive gerrymander that could net 5 more House seats for the GOP in the midterms. But the quorum-breaking Texas Democrats are touting the national attention they have brought to the redistricting fight and looking for hope from California, where Governor Gavin Newsom has vowed to move forward with his own new map. Here is what to know as Democrats plan to end the standoff. Why now? It was always...
So we'll get to some of those details in a moment. Yeah, hey, it worked, everybody. Good times. So this was all over the news. You may have missed this, but it was quite the story. Texas Democrats are actually leaving the state because you have to have so many people in order to vote, and they could not stop the vote with their actual voting power, but if they left the state, they didn't have enough people present, and they couldn't actually hold the vote. So they brokered some sort of deal. And of course, Greg Abbott, Republican, very high profile Republican governor of Texas, was involved. And I read somewhere, maybe we'll get to it here from the Hill, that they're going to have some national protest again, powered by the Democrats from California. So, Nate, what do you think about this? We talked about this a bit briefly, so go ahead and reiterate those thoughts, as well as anything else. If I don't want gerrymandering to happen. If you live in a red state and you can get some blue people to Congress, or you live in a blue state and you can get some red people to Congress, I mean, that's what voting is for. But if you have enough red power or you have enough blue power in the state that they can change the districts, well, I mean, that's the ability that they have. They have to have the cojones, once again, to do that. But just like President Trump, he's using all these powers we're not used to seeing, and some with Biden as well, especially the pardon power he used at the very end of his presidency. If it's a power they have, try to challenge it in the courts. But if that's what having such a super majority allows you to do, well, then maybe that's the way it should work, especially when you can have other states reacting, like California in a blue way, reacting to what's happening in Texas, originating from red, the Republicans. What do you think?
I think if you don't prohibit that in your state constitution, in your laws, it's hard for me to disagree with it from a legal standpoint. It's obviously kind of, I don't know, a little bit sneaky. It's my view that both major parties are going to do this as long as both major parties exist. And for that reason, I think each side is almost under an obligation to keep up the arms race. Like, if the other side continues to do it and you don't, you're going to find yourself without representation.
Yeah, that's a really good
Um,
point. You see this with
well,
nations, you see this with companies, you see this in nature. The arms race. One bug will develop some way to eat another bug, so it will become camouflaged or something else, right? I mean, this happens in every way you can imagine.
so I don't like it, but I take it as a necessary evil. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I don't even really like Democrats fleeing the state of Texas to avoid doing their job.
Yeah, that I
Mm.
actually don't like. If they're trying to do everything that they can, I can understand it, but they were like trying to issue arrest warrants and stuff, and if they can do that, I guess I support that as well. I mean, if that's something you can be held liable for as a representative of your state, I guess you should probably know that when you're fleeing. I think that might be off the table now, but I agree with you. I was not really excited when I heard that detail.
I mean, what would Democrats say if Republicans did that? They'd have the same complaint: do your job, right? I think they would, and I can't blame them. I mean, when you campaign, when you raise funds, when you go through all that work to get elected, and then because a vote's not going to go your way, you take your ball and go home. That's not democracy. I don't like it.
I guess my caveat here would be that if it's something they can do and they're not putting themselves in jeopardy of going to jail or being convicted of a low-level crime that not necessarily would have any real consequences, like Trump's 34 felonies, for instance, I guess I'm okay with it. But yeah, I don't like the optics of it. It certainly doesn't make me feel great to support the Democrats when they do that. But if I say the Republicans, hey, they have the power and they're doing something that they can do until the courts say otherwise, I don't want to fault the Democrats for doing something similar.
Hmm.
Let me see if there's anything else we can pull from this article. Oh yeah, sorry, Nate, were you going to throw in?
I was just going to apologize if I'm a little bit spacey right now because I'm on a Lego build and I'm a little stumped. Read a
That's
blueprint.
great use of your time while you're on the show. That's awesome. Yeah, use your hands. So why now? It was always highly unlikely that Texas Democrats would be able to permanently thwart the GOP's redistricting effort. But by fleeing the state, they hope to raise national tension over the issue, which I guess they were successful in doing, and inspire democratically led states to move forward with their own new maps, which certainly is the case in California. The Texas Democrats' decision to leave made the redistricting battle a national story. Now, California is moving forward with its own effort to rewrite its congressional lines in the hopes of counteracting the Texas GOP. Other blue states may soon follow. It doesn't say this. I would suggest that other red states may also feel emboldened by all of this. That seems natural. The Texas Democrats also wanted to hold out until the first special session came to an end, which happened on Friday. They cited both that and California's decision to move forward with redistricting as its preconditions for coming home. So, yeah, once again, there was a deal that was brokered here. They saw something was happening in California. They said they'd come home after that special session came to an end at the end of this week. The developments allow Democrats to frame the outcome as a victory, even if Republicans will also tout their return as a win. I think both of those things are possible. There were also other financial and political risks for the Democrats. They've been forced to parry Republican criticism that they're holding up other legislative business, including disaster. Oh, I didn't know about this. Ew, that doesn't look good. Including disaster relief for Texas, parts of Texas affected by recent floods, which were terrible, huge amount of loss of life, by staying out of the state. And each quorum breaker has been racking up a $500 a day fine for their absence. Wow, I didn't know about that. So each person owes now $500 a day for leaving the state, on top of threats of removal and arrest, which we talked about a moment ago, as well as the logistical cost of living away from their homes. Yeah, that's an interesting point. They had to leave their homes, right? I'm just going to assume they had the financial ability. Not a lot of poor people probably in state government at that level, but okay, that's an interesting continuation, or rather consideration. So what does it mean for Texas? The new GOP friendly maps are almost certain to pass once Democrats return to the state. Even as they remained out of Texas, a set of new congressional lines passed in the state Senate, while an identical set of lines were also approved by a House committee. House Republicans couldn't bring the new map to a floor in Texas, however, in the lower chamber until the Democrats returned. So they were able to stop that, but not the other things we just read. With the Democrats expected to return to Texas, Republicans will have the quorum needed to hold a vote and pass their new map. The map would then go to Governor Greg Abbott, of course, a Republican, for his signature before the new congressional lines become law. Texas Democrats knew they would inevitably return to the state, since the governor had threatened to call special session after special session until they returned. Democrats had no options available for blocking the new map, since Republicans hold majorities in both chambers of the Texas state legislature, and the GOP also has, of course, the Republican Governor Greg Abbott. National Democrats have hailed this as a win, that Republicans were unable to pass their new House map during the first special session. I mean, technically, but that's a weak win. But it says here the White House is also pushing other states like Indiana and Missouri. See, this is what I was talking about. The other red states are going to read the news too. Other red states like Indiana and Missouri to redraw their maps as well, raising questions over how many states will ultimately get involved in the fight and who will have the upper hand. This reminds me of World War I, Apostate Nate. World War I was a war that started with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. And
That's
because
correct,
of alliances,
by a Serbian nationalist. Yep.
yeah, and because of alliances, everybody in Europe got involved. Eventually, the United States, the whole world. Hence, World War, the World War, now referred to as World War I. So it'll be interesting to see if this turns into something like abortion, where you basically kind of have two zones of the United States with some people really far left, some people really far right, some maybe closer to the middle, but still picking their sides. If it turns into something like that, does it end with Texas and California, at least for now? Because, of course, gerrymandering, putting out new congressional maps happens all the time. It's not anything new, but this specific instance, how far does it go? We'll just have to wait and time will tell. As The Hill writes, the battle in Texas has turned into a nationwide war, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who of course is a high profile Democrat, wants to hold a special election in November to ask voters to weigh in on a ballot measure allowing the state legislature to redraw the state's congressional maps for the rest of the decade. That little nugget of information there that actually changes things for me. California has a lot of ballot measures. It's usually like prop this, prop that with a number. If Californians support redrawing their congressional districts, I don't know that there's really that much to discuss. Republicans are doing it just because they have power, and of course they were elected to power by the people. But you could argue, okay, we have maybe some problems with that, whichever side of the aisle you may be oriented to. But in California, if they let people decide, I don't know if that's the same thing at all. I think that's a much better situation, actually. California Democrats released their new proposed map on Friday night, and it targets 5 Republican incumbents. Other states are also considering jumping into this world war of gerrymandering. Ohio is already set to redistrict due to state requirements, and Republicans in Florida and Missouri have suggested they'll revisit their maps as well. Other blue states like New York and Illinois are also having discussions now on redistricting. But is this really the end of the discussion in Texas? The Hill says that the next front in the Texas redistricting battle is likely to play out in the courts, just like with what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now with the federal takeover of the Capitol. As Democrats noted in a statement on Thursday, their legal counsel, I guess, as a group of Democrats in Texas, has advised them to return to the state to build strong public legislative records for the upcoming legal battle against a map that violates both the current Voting Rights Act and the Constitution. We'll have to see. My guess is it doesn't, if I was to wager. But that's a question we'll have to find out. So Democratic groups are likely to file a lawsuit once Texas passes this new map. And if that battle plays out in state courts, it will almost certainly fail, since the Texas Supreme Court has a conservative majority. Yeah, of course. But if it plays out somehow, if it works out to be decided by a federal court, it's not as clear cut, given that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled favorably for Democrats in the past over the Voting Rights Act. However, at the same time, of course, go without saying, the U.S. Supreme Court still enjoys a conservative majority. And this is why I have failed to believe my fellow Democrats when they say the sky is falling with the Supreme Court. John Roberts saved the healthcare marketplace. He saved Obamacare. And there have been several decisions since the conservative majority has been very strongly installed with the Supreme Court, including during the Trump administration and the Biden administration, when you thought it would go one way and it actually didn't. So, let's not lie to ourselves. The judges that are conservative, they have a mission to fulfill. But it doesn't happen that way every time. Clearly, some big decisions like abortion, okay, well, that happened. But you can look up quite a lot of things in the past several years where it did not go the way that you might have thought. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Supreme Court. And that's the end of that. Nate, do you have any more thoughts as you work through your Lego build?
Ah, boy. I mean, you're right about the Supreme Court not, being step with Trump all the time. That's fair. There have been conservatives calling for the head of John Roberts ever since he saved Obamacare. Um, it's hard to disagree with that. When I think about strategies like packing the courts, gerrymandering, all that stuff that we know that goes on, we don't like it. We know everybody does it. I almost look at this stuff like I look at nukes, Lee. As long as the other powers have them, we would be foolish not to. Um, I can't say that I, give like my grinning seal of approval to something like packing the courts, but I'll tell you what, if I were in power and I knew what the other side would try to do when they got in, well, I'm gonna try to beat them to the punch, Lee. That's the reality of politics. It is a nasty, nasty game at its core.
And once again, I'm just so jealous of Republicans because they clearly want what they want more than we want what we want more. Democrats wasted so much political capital on, everyone decides what bathroom they use, everyone decides what team they play for, everyone decides, even if they're under 18, to have some sort of injection, hormones, puberty blockers, even surgery, things that really, when you get down to it, are not as important as so many other things. And they're slowly realizing that. But at the same time, uh, once again, they wasted a lot of that political capital, and they're still doing it now to a lesser extent. More voices on the left are speaking out reasonably against these things. Not only that they don't support, you can use whatever bathroom, or you can use in every place in the world, or you can play for whatever team. We're having conversations now about, well, how old are the people that are involved? Is this for the Olympics? Is this for a title? Is this just competing when you're just competing as a young person? It's not all the same thing. There have to be different circumstances that apply, and we have to think about this differently. But to go back to what you were saying, Nate, like I'm so jealous of Republicans because clearly they wanted to have a stacked Supreme Court more than we did. They're willing to play illegally against the rules to do that, and they got away with it. And how great would it be as a liberal person, as a Democrat, as someone who's just not a MAGA supporter, and maybe is like a really, really old school Republican, to have someone who would do the same thing for you, to have a party that would do the same thing for you. That would be amazing. I don't think we're ever going to get that. The Democrats are never going to fight like Republicans do, just like we're never going to have sensible gun restrictions in the United States. We're never going to have help for the homeless that we need. We're never going to have social services for average everyday Americans, like they do in every other advanced rich country. And so this is the state of things. I'm like Bill Maher. I want my house to be in order before I worry about other people. And it's just so frustrating that this is the other party that we have, that Kamala Harris ran the campaign that she did. Once again, I say it all the time. Trump did not win. I mean, he won. He won a big victory, but it's much more that Kamala Harris and the Democrats lost, that they fumbled. Just like when Trump won the first time with Hillary Clinton. Except that time, Hillary actually won the popular vote. She was a better candidate. She ran a better campaign than Kamala Harris did. And as I've said on the show before, I truly believe that Trump really benefited from not being in power. I think people kind of forgot about him in that way. And if he, just like he lost to Biden, if he had been in the White House, maybe somehow Kamala Harris could have beat him, just like Biden did. Biden won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. But this was the situation that we had. People kind of forgot Trump in the White House, and Kamala shat the bed. But with all due credit that is necessary, the second administration of Trump is rather different than the first one. I am quite impressed with everything he's been able to accomplish. And the fact that the United States is not burning, even with the tariffs. Now, with the tariffs, as they start to really happen, we are going to start seeing, and we have started to see those negative effects. The US dollar is very, very weak right now. And that will continue to play out. But I don't know. I feel like he's going to be able to spin it. And to be honest, our tariffs have not been fair with many countries around the world, including our allies. So once again, with Donald Trump, I support the idea of enforcing immigration law. I support the idea that if ICE is a thing that exists and they have the legal right to deport people, which they certainly do, we can talk about their methods, but they certainly have that right. They should be doing that much more than ever before. But the way he goes about it, once again, I feel like the tariffs, we were getting the raw end of the deal in many cases, but the way he goes about it. But again, to go back to a previous point I just made, maybe you don't get this amount of action. You don't get these decisions. You don't get this output from a president unless they act this way. And that goes back to me talking about how the Democrats just don't want it as much as the Republicans. And I crave so much some Democrat that could do 25% of the things that Trump does, but for the liberal causes that I'm almost always behind. Now I rank them, so I'm all for gender identity and all these different things, but that's really low on the list. So it's the order that the Democrats have a problem for, and it's the passion. It's we don't care what's the precedent. We don't care even what the legality is. We're going to do it anyways because we know this is the right thing to do. That's what Republicans do. God damn, would that be nice on our end. Let's jump over to stereo. We got some voice messages here. Let's hear from Pixel Pete. Take it away.
Okay, so what are the effects of that dollar going down? Like, is it affecting you at all, or is it just because you're reading the stats?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Pixel. So me specifically right now, like, no, I'm not trying to trade dollars for euros or Australian dollars or something like that. But it affects everybody. The value of American currency affects everyone. The US dollar is very low right now. That's not good. Now, in some cases, countries will even try to devalue their currency because they'll have a very specific reason. But in this case, it would be much better to have a stronger US dollar like we did previously under the Biden administration. And so can we point to this as specifically happening because of this, or this? Okay, well, that's always a bit sticky to try to do that. But a weak dollar right now, I'll try to ask ChatGPT about this to get some more information. But whether or not that affects you when you're buying food at the grocery store, okay, let's talk about that situation. But a weak dollar, I believe right now, let me ask ChatGPT. Okay, so let's see what ChatGPT has about this. Like I was saying, it can be a mixed bag. There are actually times when a country will devalue its currency, but here's what ChatGPT says. Imports get pricier. Everything the U.S. buys from abroad, electronics, clothing, foreign cars, oil, costs more in dollar terms, and that fuels inflation, which Trump has always blamed Biden for inflation. Travel abroad, of course, is going to be more expensive. If you're going to Europe, Mexico, Japan, name the place, your dollars don't stretch as far. Hotels, food, local goods are effectively just more expensive because the dollar exchange rate is not as good. US dollar is also the world's main reserve currency. A weak dollar signals uncertainty and can spook investors about America's economy and fiscal health, which certainly is not something we want to do. However, there are some positives here. U.S. exports get a boost. A weak dollar makes American-made goods cheaper for foreigners. Unfortunately, we don't have the production that we used to have when it comes to American goods, but certainly we still have them. That helps U.S. manufacturers, farmers, and companies that sell overseas. Also, tourism here. We talked about a negative tourism abroad, but foreign visitors to the U.S. find goods cheaper, which can bring in spending and support local economies. Now, from what I understand, the U.S. is not a great place to visit under the Trump administration. We've talked about it on previous shows. People have come just to visit and they've been held for several or even more days by customs officials. They've been turned around and told to go home. I anecdotally, I have some friends who have talked about not wanting to come to the United States because someone from their country was held and forced to go back. Also, debt relief. Countries that borrow in US dollars may find it easier to pay back their debts when the dollar is weaker, which can help stabilize global markets, though this doesn't directly benefit an average American. But I would say with our national debt being so big, I'm not sure that's an enormous benefit because usually we owe people money. So the bottom line for the average American, a weak dollar means higher prices at Walmart, Target, and the gas pump, plus more expensive vacations overseas. But for American companies selling abroad, it could be a gift. So that's the answer there from ChatGPT. Let me know if you have any questions, Pixel. Let's go back and hear from you again.
So what makes you think that the deporter in chief at some point, if she would have taken the White House, at some point she was going to turn around and start deporting people? You know, like, oh, it's time for her to do her fucking job now that she's president. Was she just going to, but she won the vote and then now what? We have people fucking screaming along the fucking corner and shit. What the fuck? This is what you wanted?
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but I believe you're talking about like maybe if Kamala Harris had won the election. Democrats do deport people. The Biden Obama administration, I think for the entirety of 8 years, it may have been just the first term, 4 years, or the second term, they deported like 3 million people. They just didn't talk about it. Biden built the wall while he was president. They didn't want to talk about it, but the wall was expanded under Biden. Biden put caps on people who could come in. Biden put caps on people who could ask for amnesty when they were trying to come to the United States. Yeah, Democrats do those things. Republicans talk about it a lot more. It's much more of a campaign issue. You don't see Democrats almost ever campaigning on border security. Maybe the caveat would be if they were from a border state. Certainly, the used to be a Democrat mayor of New York before all that stuff happened was talking about how New York can't take any more people. Those are things that he said. So they do deport people. They do increase border security. They don't talk about it a lot. So hopefully that answers your question. Apostate Nate, your hand is up. What do you have to say? And then we'll go back to messages on stereo.
That's a glitchly. Unfortunately, sometimes that happens on Spaces. So right now, my hand is actually not up, as far as I can tell.
But do you have anything to add now that I have you on the line? Anything to add over the last couple of messages from stereo?
I don't think, Lee. No, I don't think so. I think your responses basically cover it here. I'm sorry to say. Well, I'm not sorry to say, but I think you covered it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, Lee. I think you had some good responses. Thanks for that, Apostate. I really appreciate that. Underhanded compliment. No, actually, Lee, what you said, unlike normally, what you said actually made some sense there. I don't have, surprisingly, I mean, I'm surprised. I wish you could see my face, like the look of surprise. I don't have anything to add. That's why I love having Apostate Nate on the show. All right, so Pixel Pete,
I
you've
mean,
left me a bunch of
if you
messages.
got
Go ahead
nothing,
and
you don't
just
talk, right?
one second pause, and I'll jump back to you. Pistol Pete, go ahead and let me catch up on your messages, and then once I catch up, you can leave some more. And then we do have Google Maps guy, a few messages from you as well, so we'll catch up on those. But sorry, what were you saying, Apostate Nate?
Um, Nothing major. My train of thought's already gone. I think I was just Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I've learned a lot of lessons in life, Lee, from talking as if I have an answer when I don't, and so I try to avoid that. The power of the phrase "I don't know" is lost on so many people.
Yeah, and I appreciate that from you. A lot of the times you'll say, like, I'm not the person who should be making this decision, or I'm not quite sure. But when you're forced, like, hey, I say, hey, Apostate Nate, what do you think? um that allows you to just kind of have a stream of consciousness, and I really just want to know what people think. I think you've maybe seen this change, but you're more of a newer supporter on Patreon and follower of the show. I've been doing this for several years, and previously I used to argue with people to try to change their minds, and I just realized over time that I'm not changing anyone's mind. I don't even think people that have national talk shows or people with millions of followers on YouTube, name the medium, they're not really changing people's minds ever. What they often do, well, okay, sometimes they can. Absolutely, you can have an effect. I probably don't, but some people can. What I think is more efficient and what I think makes the show better, and what I enjoy more from people that I agree with as well as people I don't agree with. I follow lots of different content creators through many different mediums, is when they just tell you what they think. They give you what hopefully are real data points to back that up. And then they're trying to empower other people who basically believe that to have really good talking points, to feel justified in their beliefs. And then through that, um, sort of evangelicism, if you will, evangelism, is that, yeah, evangelism, yeah, I can talk, through that
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Got it.
evangelism, even though I'm an atheist, but through that sort of preaching, then perhaps you can affect change because other people feel empowered by you, they feel justified, and they can try to convince the people that are important in their lives. That's just a theory, but certainly I think it's become more enjoyable for me, and I think the show has become better when I'm not trying to argue with people and just shut them down if they don't agree with me, but rather I really want to hear what people think. And I hope that through the conversation, me prodding your answers and asking for more, that you can give me something that is legitimate, that allows me to sort of understand not only why you think that way, but how you might feel correct. Maybe you are correct. And then the value of those sort of conversations, rather than pretending I'm going to change people's minds, is that I learn a lot about them. I feel like I learn a lot about the United States as well as other countries when people call into the show from abroad. So that's sort of my reason to continue doing the show. I like having these conversations. I like learning from people, even if the only thing I learn is their perspective, whether or not it's backed up by actual data and facts. Let's hear now from, we'll hear from Pixel Pete here in a bit, but let's hear from Google Maps guy.
No matter what you say or how you claim what you feel, you will never feel at home on a land that was stolen from someone and you're aware of it.
Google Maps guy, I really appreciate the opinion, but I 100% disagree. I've talked about this on the show, and I absolutely believe this. If you say that, you have to not only walk the walk, you have to talk the talk. So if you're going to talk the talk, then we need to get every person that has European ancestry out of the United States. And that's not only crazy, it's not feasible, it's not possible. We have to get everyone out of the country that doesn't have native ancestry. And in fact, most people that have native ancestry have a very mixed ancestry that includes a lot of places that are not the United States before 1492. So when you say something like that, I don't really actually believe that's what you're advocating for. And if you're not, to be completely honest, I don't find any value in that sort of argument. I find the value in that thank you. I understand now your opinion and I'm interested in talking about it. But there's no action plan for that. It really feels like when someone says that, let me know if this is why you said it. But for me, it feels like when people say those things, they're just trying to make people feel bad about themselves. And I don't find a value in a comment that just is trying to put people down because of who they are, not because of any specific actions they were a part of, but because of who they are. So that's my response. I'd love to hear more from you. If you think I'm wrong, I feel like you're probably going to say I'm wrong, but I truly believe when someone says that, they're not actually thinking what that would actually mean, and they're really just putting people down. Those are my thoughts. Really appreciate the back and forth on the show. All right, so we got a lot of messages over on stereo. Let's go ahead. If you've already left some messages on stereo, I'd like to get to all of them. You took the time to listen and to leave a message, so I really would like to hear from you. If you've already left a message, go ahead and hold off for now. I have quite a few from Pixel Pete. I have some from Google Maps Guy as well, and I want to get to those. So go ahead and take a listen. Let me know what you think, and then you can leave some more messages later. Let's hear from Pixel Pete, and then we'll hear from Google Maps Guy. Pixel Pete, take it away.
I mean, yeah, like overall, I'm pretty sure it is. But as far as I've seen, like gas is down. The price of food is down. You know, eggs don't cost $10 a carton or whatever. You know, so overall, yes, I'm pretty sure it is, like with the trading and all that stuff. But to the regular American consumer, it's not looking like it. And as far as I've seen with the stock market, like, is it really that bad?
So yeah, a few different things. The stock market generally goes up overall no matter what policy there is. That just has been the case throughout our lifetimes. So yeah, I don't think you can point to that. Secondly, prices of groceries fluctuate. And if we talk about eggs were so expensive for so long. There were some kind of solutions that were introduced to try to bring that down. And of course, you have market fluctuation. You'll have price correction. If people are buying less eggs, well, then they'll have to do something about the price. And that's just the producers. But then there's also a bunch of other things that have been put into place. We can talk about those if you're interested. But specifically about tariffs or the American dollar, those sort of things can have very quick turnaround. So if you go to France right now, it's going to be a lot more expensive than it was, whatever time in the past we're comparing it to. And that's something you would see right now today. But other things take time. And so you can't point to, look at the price of this or the price of this or the price of gasoline. A lot of those things are already fixed because they've been in the queue for a very long time. So some things can be changed overnight, within a few weeks, a few months. Other things take some time. And then no matter what the timeline is that we're discussing, this is not the only inputs on how much this, that, or the other costs an average American. There are a lot of other things going on as well. So, for instance, the U.S. dollar is really weak right now, but let's just say, as an example, let's say hypothetically the euro also tanks and it's really low. So you could say, well, if you're going to France, it's actually not that big of a difference because the euro is also low in this hypothetical situation. But if you go to Japan, maybe that's not the case. If you go to Australia, that's not the case. So it's really hard to have these wide-ranging results very quickly. but I understand what you're trying to say. You understand that generally a weak dollar can equal these things for an average American, but okay, what about this and what about that? It's very complicated. So hopefully that makes sense. Apostate Nate, I see your hand is up. Is that another glitch or do you have something?
No, that's a real Hanley. You never can tell with Twitter Spaces. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't some of the inflation in the price of eggs have to do with a flu that hit the bird population itself, and they just had to get rid of a massive amount of product, and I think that had a lot to do with it. You know, some things aren't actually controlled by both parties.
Yeah, that's always a consideration with chickens. So that happens all the time, and sometimes it happens more or less. But yes, that's always something that's going on. I believe you're right with that. And then specifically with eggs, that was one of the real bad products that since we started to normalize after COVID, were 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 very much affected, just like wages and worker benefits and like being able to work remotely. And we've been seeing a pushback now on worker benefits and remote status and things like that. So once again, sometimes there's some corrections that take place either naturally through the market or through government or companies intervening. But yes, once again, it's not a specific this, that, or the other. It's the whole portfolio of everything that's going on. But a real drop in the American dollar, like we've seen as of late, that's a really big piece of that portfolio. Or if there's a bunch of we got to kill millions of animals, whatever products are derived from those animals, that's a big part of that portfolio as well. So yeah, great addition there. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, Lee. I'm a terrible mathematician. Years ago, on account of this, I got a special provision where I went to get my undergraduate at the University of Pittsburgh, where I was able to take a course on microeconomic theory instead of college algebra. And this course turned out to be very formative to me. It taught me a principle that I've learned to apply not just to economics, but to really most phenomena. It's a Latin phrase. It's called ceteris paribus, and it basically means to hold all other factors constant while you're looking at just one thing. In economics, this is a
You know what?
fallacy.
I just really, really, really quickly, I would love every time
Huh?
someone quotes Latin, it's always like blah, 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 and it means something really profound. I would love for someone to just once quote Latin and be like, slavery is great. Or like, oh man, I love to poop. Wouldn't that be awesome? I've never heard those quotes in Latin. I'm sure I could look them up. But yeah,
I can
whenever
get them
anyone
for you,
quotes
Lee. I
Latin,
know.
it's something great like aim for the stars or like consider all factors. I
Mm,
love to
I know
poop.
somebody who's fluent in it, Lee. So I can shop out phrases if you want. I can text her now. My buddy's wife
Yeah, I mean,
used to
I
teach
could
Latin.
ask ChatGPT. I'd love a real Latin phrase from back in the day before it was a dead language. Oh man, I got the runs. Like, man, whatever they used to say to really just get the point across that was not all high and mighty.
Right.
You ask
I
your
don't
friend
have
that, but
a
yeah, please
I don't
continue.
have a point like that for you. But what I do have is a fallacy that's committed in economics where you just look at one thing and you treat everything else if it's like frozen in time and motion, but that's not how life works. When you're looking at one phenomena, all the other phenomena that move and change and affect it, they're also in motion. So it's a fallacy to develop kind of like a myopic view, tunnel vision. You've got to be very careful when you're talking about economics to just point to tax policy or the stability of the dollar or access to cheap energy. What have you? Whenever you try to figure out what's going on, people constantly make the ceteris paribus mistake. That's what I wanted to add, and I'm sorry that I don't have more of a sixth grade level phrase in Latin for you there.
All I can keep thinking is just how much I have of the runs. Man, it's like a garden hose down there. Okay. So yes, very good point. And I just want to point out that at the same time, because I want to make sure I'm not being hypocritical here. I'm pointing specifically to the low dollar and how that's a problem. But they're also, even when you're looking at something really big like access to energy or imports, exports, the the value of the US dollar abroad, even with really big targets that definitely have so many factors that will then play off of them, it's still looking at the whole thing. So I absolutely agree with you. Once again, just because we have a weak US dollar doesn't mean that Japan doesn't have a weak currency or Australia doesn't have a weak currency. But generally, there are things that you can look to, especially if you're traveling abroad, that just clearly are going to be some issues that you have to deal with. And once again, that can take time. Some things can be very instant. If you have an American Express and you're in France right now and you're buying some baguettes and some great coffee, it's going to cost you more than it did previously. That's a very quick way to look at it. But once again, you have micro, you have macro, and this is why economics are so divisive, because you'll have people that are talking about the same things. They'll be talking the same nomenclature, the same vocabulary, but they'll even have different perspectives, just like with law. You can have someone who is using the same cases and arguing something very different than someone who's using the same values as well. Just look at the Constitution. You can interpret it a bazillion different ways. And that's why I love doing the shows, because I want to hear what people think. So I think we just heard from Pixel Pete. Let's go back now to Google Maps guy.
No matter what you say or how you feel, you will never feel comfortable on stolen land or have stolen property that belongs to someone else and you're aware of it.
So those messages came in right around the same time. It was a little bit more detail on that one than the previous one, but it's the same general idea. What I will talk about here is stolen property that belongs to someone else and you're aware of it. The United States does not belong to people that have native ancestry. I just have to disagree with you. It happened, and we're so far removed from that. It belongs to no one. It belongs to Americans. It belongs to the United States government. It belongs to private corporations, private landowners. Absolutely disagree. The facts, I would say, disagree with you as well. What's interesting, though, is there are native sovereign territories across the United States. Sometimes there's more of them in this region than that region, but across the United States, there are parts of this area, I guess we'll use that term, that are not jurisdictions of a federal government or a state government. They are sovereign territories. They have their own police force. They have their own courts. They have different tax situations than you or I. That's different. So if I was on a sovereign nation's land and for some reason I was living there, I don't have native ancestry, that would be a very different situation. But anywhere that you're in the United States that is part of a state and thus also part of the federal United States, no. It's not stolen. You don't have to feel bad for being here. Was it stolen? Yes. But it's not stolen now. And people don't have to be made bad for living in a country, especially if they were born there. We're not talking about apartheid Africa, which also happened some time ago, but much closer to today's date than what we're discussing in the United States. I really encourage you to stop saying those things because it's just putting people down and making people feel bad for just being who they are. If it's rephrased and talked about, sovereign nations need to have more land, or sovereign people, people with ancestry to these native groups need to have more rights, more recognition. That's a very different argument. It's a very different statement to make. But I can't support what you're saying, but I do appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Let's go back to stereo. Oh, I'm sorry. Apostate Nate, yeah, your hand is up.
Yeah. So this is a difficult issue for me. I see so much. I see so much complexity in this. There is something to be said for the fact that the indigenous were around for thousands of years before, in a much smaller time frame, Europeans sort of showed up and, in many ways, systematically made sure that the natives didn't exist anymore. In the U.S., by eliminating their food supply, was one of the major things.
Disease
I
killed most people, but yes, many people were also systematically oppressed and or
Mhm.
murdered through many horrible ways. But disease killed most people in the Americas.
Mhm. Um, and I find myself, Lee, and I grant that I find myself. I talk to a lot of descendants with Lakota ancestry. They mainly live in Canada. The treaties that were violated so many years ago were technically immigration papers, from what I understand. And the Lakota that I talk to, what they really want isn't to kick everybody out. They just want the original treaties honored. And the ones that I've talked to are like, our sentiment is that you guys can stay here, but we want more of our land back and we want more sovereignty. Well, I do
Yes.
think that it is
So, really quickly to interject,
impossible.
more land and more sovereignty. I'm
Correct.
definitely interested in hearing those discussions. But if we go with like original treaties, let's just say, as an example, there's some hypothetical, there's some treaty that says the entire state of Minnesota needs to be sovereign territory, an independent nation. I don't care. Like, you can't do that. So to have more recognition, more rights, more land, yes, those are valuable asks, and we should have those discussions. But if someone's talking about obeying original treaties that you just could not do today, I I don't know what to say other than no. But please continue.
Um, I think you're rightly in the sense that it would be a logistical nightmare to just say, like, the United States doesn't exist anymore, that Canada doesn't exist anymore, that the Europeans here are just sort of free floating. There is a real logistical problem to I guess, the essence of the complaint. Um, you can't just uproot that many people. I mean, where would you put all of the displaced
I mean,
people of
people have a
Europeans?
problem with what ICE is doing now, or like a Republican pledge that every single person who's here illegally has to go home. That's nothing compared to what honoring every treaty would actually do, or just saying the United States is native land.
It's a logistical pickle, Lee, because like you, I see the impossibility of it, even the silliness of it. And I also see a history that doesn't make Europeans look great in how they populated these lands. I mean, don't forget, European conquest of this continent is based off of
Oh,
the
so it was absolutely terrible. But
Mhm.
one thing that Bill Maher has talked about, I think he did it in the last maybe year. He did a specific end of the show rant where it's not a rant, but he just like talks for 7 minutes, and they have clips they'll play, or they'll have different photos that pop up. Overall, if we just say the United States before 1492, these tribal identities, these tribal groups, these nations were not peaceful. They had slavery. They did a lot of terrible things. And I know you're not saying that they weren't, but I think something that's lost is that a lot of people say, and I think a lot of people unfortunately very incorrectly assume, that everything was fine and everyone was at peace. Oh no, the Native Americans across North and South America, slavery, terrible wars, human sacrifice. I mean, things like that. So I just want to point out that while everything about European conquest of North and South America and elsewhere around the world needs to be said, and factual things need to be pointed out as this was horrific, and let's never do this again, and let's remember and let's not forget this, very similar things in the way that they could exist because they were in North and South America. It's not like natives invaded Europe, were also occurring before that happened. And I feel like that's lost. These were not peaceful continents before the Europeans arrived.
I think, Lee, the reality of that is sometimes used as justification, and I don't think it is, and I don't think you would agree either. But sure, full histories, especially when you're covering that much land and that much people, I think by definition they're going to be a lot more complicated. Condemning European colonialism, um, certainly isn't any kind of necessary approval of bad behavior that occurs on the other side, right? So I think I'm on the same page with you.
Yes, absolutely. I just interjected there because that had not been brought up yet in this current conversation. And it's something that unfortunately I don't see almost ever. And one of the reasons I like Bill Maher so much is that not only do I think he's intelligent, he's a comedian. He doesn't pretend he's not, but so is Jon Stewart. And I have a lot of respect for both of those men. They say the things that are uncomfortable that we often don't say. I mean, everyone criticizes Trump, everyone criticizes the Republicans, but some of my favorite Jon Stewart and certainly my favorite Bill Maher is when he takes down the Democrats and when he talks about these uncomfortable truths about the United States area, North and South America as a whole, before people came. You can talk about the same thing about the African slave trade. Africa was not a peaceful continent before that happened. There's undeniable proof out the wazoo that Africans often sold each other into slavery. And then, of course, it turned into the horrific slave trade that hopefully we all know about. But once again, open history, truthful telling of history should recognize all of these things. And when people on the left, because they're the ones that talk about, oh, you can't feel good on stolen land, you have to feel really bad about yourself just because of who you are and not any specific acts that you have committed, but just because of who you are, they don't address a full reading of history. And that's something I'll always try to point out, not specifically you, Apostate Nate, in this conversation, but that's something I think is really valuable, and that's why I brought that up. Let's jump back in. I'm sorry, Apostate Nate. No. Did you want to finish? Was there anything else you wanted to add before I went back to Syria?
I'm fine. Take it over to your messages.
Excellent. Yeah, because we have a lot of messages over here. I can't even remember who we played last, so I'm gonna play some Pixel Pete. I'm gonna play some Google Maps guy. Great name, Google Maps guy, by the way. Oh, we got a new one. We haven't heard from Dan yet, so let's hear a little bit from Dan. And then once again, I apologize, but I just have so many messages, and I would like to play them all. If you've already left some messages, just go ahead and hold off until I can clear this out. I have more than 9. Stereo, once you go above 9, it just says like 9 plus, and I really would like to play these messages, so just go ahead and hold off, please. Let's hear from Dan. Let's hear a new voice we haven't heard from yet, and then we'll get back to some of the people we've already heard from who took the time to leave a message, and I definitely want to hear from them. So let's hear from Dan.
The land belongs to God. That being said, that's why when we fuck it up, we get God's wrath. Floods, earthquakes in diverse places, eclipse, volcanoes.
Well, that's a really interesting topic. So thank you for interjecting that, Dan. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're religious, I would say really religious, that if you think that all of the earth belongs to God, well, I assume that would trump, to use that term, any sort of ancestral claim to land. So yes, once again, there's just like in economics, there are a lot of competing factors here. I'm an atheist. I don't have a problem with people believing, and more power to you. But I'm an atheist, so for me, that argument falls pretty flat. But when you talk about, oh, well, look at earthquakes and hurricanes and droughts and record heats and all these other things, to go back to data, I always talk about data and facts. That's one way to look at it. It's the wrath of God. Another very easy, logical, provable way is that human beings, which I guess are the children of God, humanity, we are doing things to the earth that can be measured and is having a lot of negative effects on people in the United States and everywhere around the planet. It's also true, we've talked about it on the show before, that these sort of changes have happened without humanity through the millions, hundreds of millions, billions of years of Earth history that we can measure and that we know. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, but the stuff that we have obtained to be a fact based on all these scientific measurements we've taken throughout the existence of humanity. While it has happened before, if a comet hits the Earth, if an asteroid hits the Earth, if there are mass volcano eruptions around the planets or just in one very large specific region, then when you have climate change and you have all these natural disasters, okay, if an asteroid hit the planet 300 million years ago, there's nothing that we could have done about it, right? But there are things we can do about human caused, human accelerated, human worsened climate change. So those are my answers to your message. Thanks for leaving the message, and I'd love to hear more from you, Dan. But please hold off for now because I just have so many messages, including more from you. I'm just going to start going in order because I forget who we heard from previously before Dan. Let's hear again from Pixel Pete.
But see, like, this is what happens in other countries too. Like, look at the border from Mexico and Guatemala. They do exactly the same thing. Look at the borders over there in Europe. They do exactly the same thing. But see, like, I've always been really confused about this. Like, when America wants to say, yes, America for Americans, right? It's the most racist thing you've ever heard. But when it's Mexico for Mexicans, right? And that's happening right now. Look at the border over there in Guatemala. They treat people from Guatemala or anybody in those central countries that are trying to cross into Mexico even worse than ICE does. They get extorted. It's a nightmare over there, right? But when they want to do it here, it's Hitler, Nazi youth, it's or whatever. It's Hitler and da da da. Why?
Yeah, I really appreciate the comment, Pete. This goes back to open history, a truthful telling of all history and current times. Europe is not pro-immigration. Some countries like Germany are more pro than other countries, but they're not pro-immigration the way that Canada is, the way that the United States is, the way that Australia is. And even, I should say, throughout anyone who's listening to this right now, the entire time you've been alive, America has been the most immigrant-friendly country in the world. Canada is also really high up there, but they don't share a border with Mexico the way that we do. Australia is really high up there, but Australia, I've noted on the show many times, has boat people. If you come to Australia illegally via boat and they catch you, you will be exported to like Manus Island and some other place that the Australian government pays to take these people, and you are never allowed to come back to to Australia ever again. Tourism, visit family, you're done. Look it up. Don't believe me. Look it up. It's a real thing. We have nothing like that in the United States. Now, if you commit a crime aside from immigration crimes, maybe you would never be allowed back in the United States, but we don't have anything like them. And once again, Canada shares a border with the most powerful country in the world. We share a border with Mexico and Canada. So, my opinion, and I think it's backed up by facts, America is the most welcoming country in the world my entire lifetime, your entire lifetime as well. Even under Trump, we're much more welcoming than many nations out there. And so, yes, this guilt, this constant, you're bad, you're American, the American government is bad on immigration, it's absolutely untrue. I agree with you on that. Absolutely. Traveling abroad, meeting people from abroad, just reading about other countries' immigration policies, other countries have walls. Other countries deport a lot higher percentage of people than we do. America is huge, so if it's total numbers, it's a slightly different argument. But we are absolutely welcoming. We are the most welcoming nation for immigration. It's taken a turn under Trump, but we're still a very welcoming country compared to many of our allies and compared to many of our non-allies. Absolutely. Thank you for the comment, Pixel Pete. Got more comments from Pixel Pete, but let's now go to Google Maps guy.
Actually, because you disagree with it, we need to get all the people in your DNA and DNA out of the country because your DNA is probably the one who stole it.
Again, Google Maps guy, I appreciate you letting us know how you feel, but you're literally just telling people to feel bad about their DNA. You know, America and most other nations are built upon the premise that you are not responsible for the crimes of your family members. You're not responsible for the crimes of your parents. In the United States, you're not even responsible for the debt of your parents. You know, if you like co-signed a loan, that's different, or if you signed up for a house with your parents, like that's different. But if your parents are really highly in debt and they die, you don't have to do anything. If you have college loans that last into your adulthood when you have children and then your children's become adults and you're still paying back these loans, they don't owe any of that money. You literally just tried to make me feel bad and made other people try to make other people feel bad because of their DNA. I mean, I know it's an overused criticism, but that's what the Nazis did. I really would ask you to reevaluate that line of thinking. And if you truly believe that, that's really dangerous talk. So I once again, I appreciate you letting us know how you feel. Please continue to do that. You've done it in a respectful way. You're not singling out individuals, but in the respectful way you've done it, it's still really, really, really alarming. So I would encourage you to rethink those comments. Let's hear from Dan.
You could just say it simply, Guy. It's not stolen because this is a completely new generation. We're not the same generation as Christopher Columbus. I don't know if people picked up on that.
Similar to what I was saying earlier, I think within one, a two, a three, you know, you can play it based on the circumstances, but the general idea of a new generation, once again, I'm not guilty of my father's crimes, and neither are you. You're not guilty of your aunt's crimes, your grandmother's crimes. And if you really believe that the people that have DNA that does not match native area of the United States need to leave or feel bad, those are very alarming things to say. And not even practical, as Apostate Nate and I were mentioning earlier. Like, I mean, like, what would that even look like? And America's the world power. Like, what would that do to the rest of the world? Even if we like created a new continent in the Pacific that was completely human made, and we just moved everybody out of the United States that had DNA that didn't belong here, according to you. How do you do that? Can't get past that. How does that affect the rest of the world when America is basically empty? And what about people that have I mean, everybody has mixed ancestry. Where do you draw the line? This is really alarming stuff. Really appreciate all the comments, though, everybody. Apostate Nate, your hand is up.
Lee, years ago, I read Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, which talks about how in your body, in your very cells, genes will sort of compete for survival, survival of the fittest genetically. That's the only circumstance in which I can see a gene stealing something, right? I don't know how a gene steals land. Like, what did my genes, like the DNA that's in me right now, what did that steal?
I mean,
I just think that's
that's
an
what I would say if I was full of evil European DNA too, Nate. Sounds like you're just trying to prevent your own deportation from the United States.
Lee, the few years I've had, a deportation might be a nice change in scenery for me. I don't know.
Yeah, clearly I was trying to make an example there. But I mean, once again, DNA, like that's how we're judging people now. Um, we've talked on shows a long time ago. We haven't done one of these recently where I talked about like I'm interested in a license to have children. I like sci-fi. I love these books. We're in the future. You have to have a license to have children, and that's enforced through some sort of injection or some sort of surgery. Because I feel like having a kid is a really big decision, and you need to be able to take care of the kid. But also genetic defects. You know, if your DNA means that your kids are going to have cancer in the future, maybe that should be corrected. It should have to be corrected. Or if they have the ability to do all this stuff, but they can't change the DNA, maybe you can't have children and they make it so that you can't. I'm open to these sort of really far out there discussions because I feel like we can have them now. We have enough technology now that we can imagine these hypothetical situations. And I think to some people, these thoughts are very alarming, just like I labeled some of these other previous comments as very alarming. I'm interested in having discussions that have alarming consequences, alarming human rights questions. But I think it only makes sense when there's a value associated with that. You know, if I was told that my kids were all going to have cancer, I probably wouldn't have kids. And I would understand if I lived 500 years in the future that maybe I couldn't have kids, or maybe they would make it so I could only have kids, but my DNA would have to be fixed, because there's value in that consequence. What's the value of kicking out anyone in the United States that has European ancestry or any ancestry that doesn't match up to native peoples in 1492? I don't see the value. I see a lot of negative consequences. I see a lot of hate, and I see impossible things. So hopefully I've been able to draw a distinction, whether or not you agree with me on like forced birth control in the future in some sci-fi novel. It makes sense to me if there's value associated with that. I don't see a value of kicking out people that don't have the right DNA. Apostate Nate, your hand is up.
Yeah, Lee, when you were talking about that creating resentment, I think of one of history's greatest lessons, really. And I just watched, I think it was All Quiet on the Western Front, which depicts the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, in which the Western world learned that when you kick the defeated in the teeth enough, you're going to piss them off to your detriment. Imagine the seething rage of dislocating 300 million plus people from the American continent. I just know it's such a bad idea. Whoever left that message, like, go apologize to your mother for turning out poorly, because that's a really, really disgusting thought.
Wow, harsh words from Apostate Nate. Um, yeah, I mean, World War II was directly preceded by the end of World War One. It put Germany in a really bad position. It's very arguable that you did not have to penalize Germany as much as they did. And then maybe they wouldn't have caused a German depression. And speaking of the value of the US dollar, the German Reich, would it have been? No, sorry, the German Reichmark? Whatever it was, the German currency at that time. Now they're all in euros. Um, it just plummeted, and you couldn't buy anything. You need stacks of cash to go to the grocery store. And that allowed the Nazis, the Nazi party, to be elected into power. And then once they were elected into power, they seized control undemocratically, but they got in there because people were upset and they promised solutions. I'll let you draw your own connections, if you will, to anything that's happening today. So not only is it impossible, and and we should rightfully disagree with even the premise. If it was to happen, that's a whole other consequence. What are all these deported people going to do? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Apostate Nate. Let's jump back to stereo. Okay, we got some new voices. Let's hear from Doberman. Yes, Doberman, take it away.
I think you know what you're doing, but I don't think you really believe that. Or maybe I'm wrong. But like I think you know what eugenics is, and saying a birth certificate, like whose birth certificate card to who's allowed to have children or how many children you're allowed to have based on your economics or your genetics, if you're not tall enough, if you're not this, you understand the slippery slope with this? Like, it's all subjective. And yes, CRISPR and all these things are coming out that most likely, if it's affordable to the general public and not just the 1%, this should help people prevent these genetic defects before their child's born. But talking about banning certain people, that's subjective because certain people think other people shouldn't reproduce, and some people think someone like you shouldn't either. No, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. So I was kind of weaving a scenario of many possible restrictions. I did not say specifically this group or that group. I remember mostly talking about DNA and cancer, that sort of thing. But I wasn't advocating for it. I said I'm interested in having those conversations. So I appreciate your comment because it continues the conversation. But if you're thinking I was saying those things, you're absolutely incorrect. And you can go back on Rumble, you can go back on Twitch, go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate and listen to what I said. I didn't say those things. So I definitely don't agree with that approximation of my comments. But I don't apologize for interjecting a hypothetical. I'm very interested in how humanity is going to develop. And I hope that in the future, once everyone listening right now is long gone, that we can have a technology that allows everyone to have children who are going to be healthy from their birth, like guaranteed. And I think that is an advancement of human civilization. Now, is it a slippery slope? You're absolutely right, because while I think cancer is not objective, or I'm sorry, it's not subjective, that's very objective. Other things, tall people, rich people, poor people, those things, that's the slippery slope. And that's the real enjoyment of the art of the hypothetical for me, is trying to figure out a way that you account for those things. So imagine 500 years in the future, all it is diseases. And let's say they can cure them. So everyone can have children and you can have disease-free children, aside from getting an infection, once they're born, but things that are not coded into their DNA to make sure that they get some sort of illness or they're more likely to get those sort of illnesses. And you could do that without eye color, without skin color, that sort of a thing. Let's imagine that they have those rules, but they can't fix them. Okay, well, that's an even slipperier slope. The slope has gotten more slippery. I'm interested in having those hypothetical conversations as well. So if you have really bad cancer percentages in your DNA, you can't have kids. I'm open to having that discussion, but I'm not talking about any of those other things that you mentioned. So hopefully you understand that now. Oh, hey, Lord Reggie has joined us over on Twitter Spaces. Good to have you, Lord Reggie. Regular over here on Newz Debate. If you want to be like Apostate Nate and be a constant co-host either on Stereo or Twitter Spaces, and also if you tweet me or send me messages on our Discord server, I'll read them first. Please support the show over on patreon.com/NEWZ Debate, like Apostate Nate and Better Vibes and Lola and Shannon, Sneaky Elbow Ron, MC Funk Bjorn, and some other people over on patreon.com/NEWZ Debate. I absolutely love doing this show. I love having these conversations. I love hearing from people who disagree with me. I love hearing from people. I love doing this. And I mostly do it just as a labor of love. But if you enjoy the content and want to throw me a few bucks and also receive some benefits, I'm all for it. All my links are at bit.ly/NEWZ debate. Wherever you're listening, you can tweet me. You can send me messages on my Discord server. Join Discord by going to bit.ly/NEWZ debates. And if you're specifically over on stereo, you can leave me voice messages. Okay, so what I'm going to start doing is I think I need to wind down the show, but I'd like to play as many. I think I'd like to play all the messages over on stereo. So I'm going to try to play them, and unless there's anything new, maybe I won't interject other than saying the name of the person who has left them. So we'll try that and see if I can have enough self control to stay quiet. Let's hear from Pixel Pete, and we're going to hear a bunch from Pixel Pete, and I'll only interject if I think I need to. Pixel Pete on stereo.
Yeah, Obama deported more people in history. He has the right, was it like 3 million or something? And who was the whole Kamala campaign was pretty much run by Obama. Like, everybody knows that. How do people don't see that? Look, this is when it comes to, okay, check this out. If you win the Hispanic vote, you know, you get the whole pie, right? And I remember I voted for him, right? So when Obama's doing this thing, and the whole yes we can thing, yes we can, yes we can, yes we can. Who do you think he stole that from? He stole that from a Mexican slogan that we used to say all the time in soccer games. Si se puede, because Mexico was losing all the time. Si se puede, si se puede. Like, yes we can. It's the same thing. He stole that and put it in under his fucking slogan, and he won the Hispanic vote because they're like, oh, I say the same when I'm watching soccer games. Si se puede. It's a very fucking smart move on his ass, and took my vote, and he deported people. Here's another point of view. Like, check this out, right? So, you know, and there's no budge on white people and shit, because I'm not into this whole racist bullshit. But a lot of like white Democrats, they look at me and they're like, I'm sure you voted for her, right? Yeah, like, we lost the election, you know, like, oh, you know, this guy's in the White House now. I'm like, what makes you think I voted for her? Because of the way I look? Like, that shit. It's a little racist, but I'm going to let it slide. No, I didn't vote for her. Thank you very much. Yes, I look like a Mexican that could fucking lawn your mower and shit, but yeah, no, I didn't vote for her. And I also disagree with you because, like, I'm Mexican, dude. I was born here, though. You know what I mean? But I'm here, and to a lot of my Mexican people, I'm not Mexican enough because I wasn't born in Mexico, right? But I lived in Mexico for 4 years. I was poor as shit. I had lice. All we ate was rice and beans for 4 years because we were poor, right? But even then, I'm not Mexican enough, right? But they're like, oh yeah, I'm living in a country that used to be Mexico. This used to be Mexico. I was like, yeah, it used to be. I'm living in a place that used to be Mexico. Do I feel like I'm somewhere where I'm not supposed to be at or something like that? No, dude. Just look at the facts. Like, do I feel like I'm living in a place where da da da? Like, dude, this used to be Mexico. I lived in Mexico. It's the same thing. It's just like you choose to think that way, though. Why? Why do you choose to have that mentality? Like, get that, like, parasite, like, out of your brain. Whoever made you think that way, man, no, dude, no. Look at where we live. We live in a really good fucking country. We live in one of the greatest country in the world. Okay, yeah, the dollar's not the best, but you have the freedom to do whatever the hell you want here. Freedom of expression. You have the freedom of, let's say tomorrow you want to go and do that. No one's going to stop you. Who's going to question you? For what reason? A couple of months ago, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a truck driver. I'm in truck driving school. I didn't pay a dime. Oh yeah, we got scholarship.
So I will jump in here. Thank you for all the comments, Pixel Pete. I can't say anything about your specific situation, notably there at the end going to truck driving school for free. But I can tell you that generally in the United States, education is not free. But if you lived in almost any other place in the developed world, it would be much cheaper, if not free. People who live in Canada also have nearly every single freedom that we do here. People who live in France, who live in Italy, it's a bit different in Europe, but they also can do mostly whatever they want without someone telling them what to do. What I often bring up when it comes to freedom of speech is Australia. Australians generally have freedom of speech like we do, but it's actually not included in their constitution. And so we saw during COVID that just posting on Facebook that you should go outside and not follow the lockdown rules got people arrested. We've talked about that specifically on this show. So there are big differences, but generally, the stuff that you're talking about, you would have those freedoms pretty much anywhere else in the developed world and many developing countries as well. And in fact, your education would be most likely always cheaper outside of the United States. So I would disagree with you on some of those things. But certainly there are things in the United States when it comes to freedom of speech and like gun ownership and some other things that we are the outlier in the rest of the world, or we have more of that than anywhere else. But generally, my advice to people is that if you want to live a good, productive, normal life, America is not the place for you. You should move to Canada. You should move to Germany. You should move to Japan. They have much more assistance for average people than we will ever have in the United States. So I would give you a nuanced reply to that message. Let's hear more from Pixel Pete. We'll just keep playing these messages and I'll keep going through them unless there's something specifically I need to jump in for. Oh, hey, we have better vibes over on Twitter Spaces, patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporter. Better Vibes, longtime friend of the show, a member of the Newz debate community. Join us on Discord and everywhere else that I have that community present by going to bit.ly/NEWZ debate. Better Vibes, do you want to throw in? I see you're a speaker.
I just arrived. I don't know what the full context of what's going on. I'm just going to sit back for a little bit so I can gauge on what's happening.
Solid move, Better Vibes. That's what I've come to expect from you. So whenever you talk, you want to make sure you know what you're talking about. Really appreciate that. Just go ahead and raise your hand whenever you'd like to speak. Really appreciate you being a member of the community and supporting me on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. Let's hear more from Pixel Pete. I'm going through, I have a lot of stereo messages and I'm trying to just play them in a row and only jumping in when I feel like I absolutely need to. Pixel Pete on stereo.
You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to truck driving school. I'm broke as shit right now. I used to be a bartender. I used to make money. I'm like, let's see what my options are. Oh yeah, you got the school loans. All right, you can come in here tomorrow and start next week. You know, you get a school loan. You can pay it off later. You know, you can start next week. Oh, I found you a Pell Grant. If you want to come in, you get a Pell Grant plus the school loan, and you can start next week. And I've been doing that. I'm 3 months in. I'm about to graduate very soon from truck driving school, and I didn't spend a dollar. I live here in the United States. If I decide not to pay it, are they gonna come arrest me? You know what I mean? But you know that the tariffs were super high, right? He just wanted to be like, you know what, dude? Why do we have to pay this much, or why are we paying this much for you to bring the goods over here? It's free. But if we want to send something to China, what is it, 100% tariffs or whatever it was? Then let's just make it even. Or at least let's bring it down. Let's have even trade at least, like Mexico too. They all budged. Well, why is it that everybody budged? Because they knew they were taking advantage of that. It's like let's at least bring it down, or let's come to like an even field where, like, you know what? Yeah, why are we paying so much for tariffs? Let's just fucking at least have some trade agreements.
So apologies, I was trying to get some information on that. We definitely have had trade agreements before Trump. And so I was trying to get a general, not necessarily this country or that country, but how did America sit with our import and export tariffs versus other countries before Trump? And so I was just trying to type that in to just get a quick reply to that comment. So now over on my Rumble and Twitch streams, all my links are available on bit.ly/NEWZ debate. I'm sharing right now chat GPT. So I said, basically, how was America treated by other countries regarding tariffs, and how do we treat them before the current Trump administration? So before Trump came in with his tariff talk, the U.S. generally leaned toward free trade with exceptions carved out for sensitive industries. The U.S. usually had low tariffs on other countries, averaging around 2 to 3% on imports. That was among the lowest in the world. We were basically the open market everywhere, the open market everyone wanted access to. Other countries could sell into the U.S. relatively easily, but we did protect certain industries, agriculture, steel, textiles, and cars with higher tariffs or quotas. For example, American farmers got heavy subsidies from the government. So while tariffs were low, subsidies acted as a trade weapon. So there's different ways you can kind of do a tariff without it being an actual tariff. So how were we treated? A lot of countries had higher tariffs against US goods than we did against theirs. The EU, China, India, and others regularly charged higher duties on American exports, especially agriculture, cars, and manufactured goods. On top of tariffs, many countries used non-tariff barriers, sneaky rules, safety standards, and certifications designed to make U.S. products harder to sell there. So, for example, before Trump, the EU charged a 10% tariff on U.S. cars, while the U.S. only charged 2.5% on EU cars. China routinely hit American goods harder than we hit theirs. So, what was the effect of all this? The U.S. market was far more open than most. That meant Americans enjoyed cheaper imported goods. Walmart could be stocked with low-cost Chinese products. But American manufacturers often felt screwed, claiming it wasn't a level playing field. Presidents before Trump, like Bush, Obama, Clinton, etc., complained about unfair treatment, but they preferred to solve it with negotiations and trade agreements like NAFTA, WTO cases, TPP negotiations, but not blunt force tariffs. Trump flipped that by using tariffs aggressively, arguing that the U.S. had been taken advantage of for decades. And I agree with Trump. So it should be a more equal playing field. But some of the things I heard in that last message from Pixel Pete are not factual. So I wanted to point that out. But thank you for the comment, Pixel Pete. Let's now hear from Google Maps guy.
The only reason why the dollar is weak is because the people backing the dollar is weak. No one wants to do work anymore. Nobody wants to produce anything anymore. They offshore all the major tasks. Even the Social Security Administration is outsourced. If America would just step it up and do some work and stop being fucking lazy, they would not be attacked by the curse of cheap labor. And that's based on that comment you said slavery is cool. If you guys can get it at a discount, you will. I mean, that's just the way you guys do it. But if you actually just buckle down, put your boots on the ground, kicked in and did some work, you'll mow your own fucking lawn, maybe America would be great. I don't know if again, but it might be great.
So Americans generally have less worker protections and less worker benefits and work more hours than pretty much any other developed nation. So factually, your basis is completely flawed. Now, talking about Americans not working like they used to, I think that there is some meat on the bone there. But I encourage you, if you have not already, do some traveling in Europe and talk to some Europeans about the benefits that they get and how, I forget the word you used, how lazy, how unmotivated they are. I think you'll be surprised. America is still a country where you are expected to work. So I would disagree with those points. Let's hear again from Pixel Pete. I'm just going in the order of the messages that I have.
How can you say that when you've actually never actually lived there? I don't know if you have, but I mean, I don't know where stolen land here, it wasn't stolen. Mexico sold it to the United States for cheap. You know, the people in that Mexican dollar, the when you have Mexican dollars, those people that are in those dollars, they sold that to the United States. This is not stolen land. They didn't steal it. It was sold.
I see Better Vibes over on Twitter Spaces has his hand up. Yes, Better Vibes, take it away.
So in regards to that gentleman's comment about working harder, the dollar is weak because the people are weak. Um, I did the math on like one of the cheapest pizzas you can buy at Walmart, which was it was $2 around 2021 2020, and then it rose up to about 376 377. And adjusting for inflation, like you work longer for the same product. So back then, when I was making tens at 1050, I was working about like maybe 9 minutes for that pizza, and now I have to work about like 12 minutes for that pizza. So like the purchasing power has definitely declined in the U.S. And which that leads to the quote unquote people being weak because we're not incentivized anymore to work because like the goalpost keeps getting inched further and further away from the American people, and we like the whole curse of the millennial is like the boomers told the millennials what to do. We did it, and we don't have what they have. Uh, Simply because purchasing power is gone. The prices everywhere rose. We don't make as much as they did. Less access to affordable housing, and just there's a slew of reasons why we as Americans are quote unquote perceived as weakers. Because like no, we weren't weaker. It's just the game has been made so ridiculously hard on us that is unreachable goals basically.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. Better Vibes has shared stories of some of the places he's worked. He's talked about being homeless and how hard that was for him previously on the show. And I always really appreciate his personal anecdotes to give clarity to some issues. My final comments before we move on to more things on stereo would be again, you can talk about perceived laziness or not wanting to work hard in the United States because I think those are real issues that have changed over time. But you also have to talk about things like we just heard purchasing power and wages and benefit. it's and long term outlook. So people's grandparents could work in a factory for 40 years and retire with benefits. No one does that anymore. So just like when we were talking about economics, there are a lot of things that you have to look at, or at least you have to be able to tell the difference between now versus then and why it's different, not just in perceived laziness or wanting to work hard, but what else has changed? What's the outlook look like? What are the opportunities? We had a lot more manufacturing back then than we do now. So it's really important to look at that. But to talk about one specific thing, like not wanting to work hard being the only reason that the dollar is low, again, I would just say factually incorrect. There are things you can point to, but to label it to one thing like that, I really appreciate your perspective. But in this instance, it is just a perspective, it is not factual. Let's continue with more. I'm sorry, yeah, better vibes.
I would care to wager that your average citizen does not have the near as an impact as the government themselves in regards to our deficit. We all we do is just partake in trade, and they partake in policy. Like they decide where the money goes. We don't. So I care to wager a wager that the government has a greater impact on the quote unquote weak dollar.
Yeah, great perspectives all around. Really appreciate everybody throwing into the show. I'm going to have to start wrapping things up, but I want to get to all the stereo messages before I do that, as well as hearing from my Patreon supporters, Apostate Nate and Better Vibes, when they have things to throw in. So let's continue doing that. Let's hear again from Pixel Pete.
It's like, yeah, stolen land from the Native Americans and stuff like that. And we glorify Native Americans so much, like, they came in, they stole the land. Really? Like, did you know that Native Americans also used to own slaves? Like, nobody talks about that, right? Yeah, that's a thing that Native Americans don't like to talk about, that they used to own slaves. Yeah.
Now we're going to jump to Google Maps guy.
Once it's stolen, it's always stolen, son. And another thing, say I come to your house and I grab your TV and I live right across the street from you. And I've got guns, I've got tanks, I've got military. What are you going to do about it? Either you're going to come take it back, or you're going to have to live with the fact that we did this famous thing called white labeling it. But before it was white labeled, it was Indian or Native labeled. Let's just stick to what's is stolen is always stolen until you give it back, or until you're done with it, or until someone does to you what you did to them. And to cover that outsourcing comment about the U.S. dollar, I know why the dollar is tanking. See Death by China documentary, YouTube. Thank me later.
Again, if my dad went over to your house and stole your TV, and then we had it, and then I became an adult and I wasn't living with my father anymore, and I was not connected to the TV, let's say he still had the TV was sold, whatever it is, I would not be responsible for that as long as I was not myself part of that particular crime. And then if my father died and you tried to sue me or say I owed you a TV, you would lose. So it doesn't sound like we're going to agree on this. I think the facts don't agree with you. And what I'm saying is true. But once again, I don't think we're going to agree on this. So I appreciate the perspective. Let's hear from Pixel Pete again.
See, Mexico was okay. Let's say Mexico. Mexico was that big piece of land, right? And a lot of people where Mexico is not right now, the map right now. A lot of people live there. A lot of the land that's here in Texas, California, and all that other stuff, it was a lot of open land because a lot of people weren't really living there. There wasn't a lot of Mexicans living in Mexico, in Texas. It was just kind of like, yeah, we own this, right? So when this whole thing was going on, they're like, yeah, we're going to sell it to you for cheap because, like, we don't even live there. Like, when you look at the history and you realize, like, somebody told you this. Me as a Mexican, oh, you live on stolen land and they took it from us. Who? What do you mean? They sold it for cheap. Santa Ana. Benito Juarez and Santa Ana got together and they sold it for pennies on the dollar. Benito Juarez is in the Mexican dollar. And everybody glorifies this guy because he was he's a dark dude and he's like a Native American. Dude, he wanted to be like the Europeans. He didn't like his own indigenous heritage. He didn't like that. He didn't want to be that. He wanted to be an oligarch. He acted like it. He did whatever he had to do, and he sold Mexico, him and Santa Ana, for pennies on the dollar. That's the truth, and a lot of Mexicans don't want to hear that, but that's the honest truth. It's not stolen; it was sold. See, that's such an ignorant thing, dude. Because it's like I'm saying here, look at Mexico. There's people that are immigrants from Guatemala and all these other places, Honduras, that they want to go into Mexico. Do you know the way that they treat the people at the border there? I told you they treat them worse. They're like, yeah, we don't want these people here. Oh wow, what's going on here? Like people don't want to talk about the immigration that's going on over there by the Guatemalan border. It's ugly. It's worse than here. And like I told you, they get extorted. It's disgusting. But when it comes to the US, like, oh, they're savages. Really? All right. And I have a lot of my family agrees with me, but a lot of my other family doesn't. They're like, "Oh, you're racist. You voted for Trump. You don't like your own people, and this is stolen land and stuff like that." I'm like, no. All I did was actually look into the actual history of what actually happened in Mexico. I just looked at. I looked up the history of where everything happened, how it happened, and we're being sold these things like by politicians and like, oh, people that want to fucking take it, dude. Even what's his name, Chavez, like, oh yeah, for the people, for the people. He wasn't for the people. He wanted to be a cult leader. That's why he wore white all the time. Like, that's the truth. Anyway, sorry, dude. I know I leave a lot of messages, but yeah, I like your conversation, man. It's cool. That's all it is, dude. They're trying to victimize you to take your vote. That's it. And they don't think you're smart enough to look into your history. Oh, not to look into history. But they're trying to victimize you and make you feel bad about yourself because they want your vote. And when the vote is done, what do they do after? Nothing happens. Have they done anything about it? You feel bad for being in this country, on stolen land. What have they done, even when they were in power? And when the Democrats were in power, what have they done to change that? They didn't do anything. It's just politics and wordplay. Oh, I agree with that. Okay. Then do something about it. They haven't done anything. There's even a thing, dude, here. They're like, hey, if you're here illegally, we'll give you money to go back to your country and then we can try this again. And you can try to come through the border legally. Is there any other country doing that? They're like, we'll give you a debit card with money in it for you to go back to Mexico and, they're giving you funds to go back and then try again legally. Oh, wow, that's not real. It's true. That's what's happening now. See, like, and then everything is always taken to the extreme, right? Like, if you have a point, yes, those are the possibilities, right? Oh yeah, then they're gonna start. What if rich people just want to have kids with rich people? But like, look at the country right now. You have gender affirming surgeries for children. And what happened in California? Now anybody can go in there and sign off and take your kid. Just like, yes, it's taken to the extreme, but yeah, we're seeing this happen, but we don't do anything about it. We talk about it, but we don't do anything about it. Like, it's pretty chaotic right now in California. That's why I left. Part of the reason why I left. And I'm in Nevada now, and I like it here.
Yeah, a lot of companies and individuals have left California. I generally look at California as a state that leads forward, but they definitely just have too much regulation for the United States. Things are too slow, taxes are too high. When you're talking about gender affirming care and just anyone can sign off and take your kid, I have no idea what you're referring to, but generally, if I understand correctly, that's not true. I just wanted to point that out. Let's go now to, we're going to hear from Google Maps guy a lot, and then we'll probably wrap up the show and end it there. We've gone almost 3 hours. It's been a great show. So let's do some more comments. Here's Google Maps guy.
Well, now we know those who are floating around with guns. Of course, you're not going to honor old treaties. Like they say, there's no honor amongst thieves. So going in any court or jurisdictional entity saying your honor, you're lying just walking in there. That man ain't got no honor. He won't even honor a treaty. And how you got the country, you had to displace some people. So for you not to displace yourself after displacing some people, that would be so noble. But you can't do it. And to think you can do anything as an American, but you can't be honorable. I'm not on the left or the right. And I'm not talking about you feeling bad about who you are. I'm telling you to get off someone else's shit before you try to kick somebody else off somebody else's shit. Because they probably more related to the person you try to kick off than you. So I don't care about ICE, I don't care about none of that. You could be the problem. You're part of the problem. That's not true. America is not the most welcoming. I've been living here for a long time now.
So that's an interesting comment. I would encourage you to travel abroad or just learn about how immigration works in other countries, and perhaps your opinion may more be aligned with fact. America is, especially before Trump, the most welcoming country in the world when you look at the numbers, when you look at the melting pot. It's a term that's used a lot, but it is true about the United States. It's not often true about other places. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But even under Trump, we are still far more pro-immigrant than so many other countries. So I would encourage you to look up some facts, visit some places. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to hear that you've had a bad experience in the United States. But again, I would encourage you to look abroad and then reassess. Let's hear more from Google Maps guy.
Dude, you got to get out of your feelings. This is becoming a lame debate if every time we have an opinion, you start talking about, you're making me feel bad. Come on, dude. I'm going to leave.
I just want to point out Google Maps guy did not leave. He left several messages after that point and is still here now, apparently, because he's left another message. So, threat not taken seriously, Google Maps guy. Just playing with you a little bit. Let's hear more from Google Maps guy.
I also say, when you say the word alarming, that goes straight into victim. Like, dude, you can't be afraid all the time. I mean, that's how people get shot in the street holding a sandwich. It's alarming. I'm afraid. I'm the victim. If you didn't do nothing wrong, don't feel like that. Don't get out your feelings. We're just debating. Don't make it alarming. Don't say, people help. He's telling the truth. That would that would look like you or whoever not deporting Mexico because it looks alarming because they don't have American DNA. They gotta go. Well, if they gotta go, you gotta go too.
Apostate Nate or oh, we lost better vibes. Apostate Nate, what is American DNA?
I've been wondering about that. Um, there's nothing. I mean, there's no sort of like uniquely. Yeah, I don't know what that means, and if I don't know what that means, that makes everything around that statement suspect and possibly meaningless. That's what I would say.
Wow, big dig from Apostate Nate. Like that. If you mean like Native American DNA, Native Indigenous DNA, I could sort of understand what you're talking about because we were talking about earlier. You are calling for anyone who's not native from this country to be expelled. So if you hear that as someone who, I'm sure if I took a 23andMe test, I'd be like 2% something. That happens a lot with people. But as someone who does not identify, did not grow up around Native people, to the best of my knowledge, have no Native ancestry, when you tell us that we have to leave and we're being judged by the sins of people who have been dead for so long, it's pointless. You talked about victimhood and stuff, and I used the term alarming. You didn't like that. I mean, what? How else are we supposed to react when we hear that? I think that's a pretty human reaction to being told you were being judged by people who died hundreds of years ago. I mean, we can talk about racism that has persisted in the United States, discrimination, but talk about actually stealing land that happened quite a long time ago. So, um, yeah, I don't know. You're kind of all over the place. I'm a little confused by your messages, to be completely honest. I mean, there's a bit of hyperbole in everything that happens on social audio, and I can appreciate that. But if you're asking us to not get offended and not turn into victims, would again ask you to not make people feel like they're becoming a victim because you're telling them we have to leave. So there's people's perceptions of what you say, and maybe you don't say it in a way that they can understand your meaning. But then there's literally just the words that you use, and I really think I'm going off the words you're using here, so more objectively taking your comments rather than subjectively. And I feel like those are pretty good reactions to the alarming, to use that term you don't like, things that you've said. Let's hear more from Google Maps guy.
You, who are consciously in control of your genes, aim the gun at somebody with their own set of genes and threaten them. You either give me a shit or you leave or you obey what I tell you to obey. So you right now are genes that are speaking. You may be conscious in those genes, but you still are genes that are speaking. And if every time you say, this sounds alarming, that is a victim gene in a victim posture saying, I'm going to feel so offended that we're going to have to stop listening to you because I can't handle the truth.
Wow. Good times. I really want to hear more from this guy, but I am thinking about just cutting him off because it's gotten more personal than it was before. Before it was still very alarming. Love that term. But now it's getting a little bit much. But boy,
To be fairly, I did throw a couple personal jabs that way, so
no, nothing like that though. I mean, this guy is kind of losing it, to be honest. But it is entertaining. It is interesting. I'll give him that. I don't think he's using the term genes correctly when we're talking about DNA. I don't think he understands what that means. Um, but boy, it's interesting. We'll hear more from Google Maps guy, but let's jump in now and hear from Doberman. Doberman.
Also, I'm pretty sure you read this book before. I think it's a fascism. I know some ultra anarcho capitalists think it's like a fantastic future, but it's supposed to be represented as a dystopian military system where, like Starship Troopers, the movie and the TV show, the movie and the book, where you have to have service, you have to be willing to sacrifice within the military system to have children. That is a form of eugenics, and that's a way to gatekeep and perpetuate the recurring existence of a bloated military. It's a way to justify the military to continue to exist. Because how can you justify the existence of a military state if there's no enemy? That's why they go to war with the bugs. It's just, no, dude. I can't get down with it.
Well, that's just unfortunate. You've butchered both the movie. There was a children's cartoon TV show that was similar to the movie, but was in a different universe. It didn't quite match up. For instance, the cartoon TV show, they were in like mech suits, and in the movie, they were just running around with armor and guns. And the book is not as you've described it. So the movie itself didn't do very well at the box office, but it's become sort of a cult favorite because you're right. If you watch the movie in one lens, it's just like armies fighting bugs, and it's like, yeah, go humanity, bugs evil. But if you really pay attention to it, it's actually talking about how bad the human government is and how bad their system is. And the bugs, while they are killing humans, they're sort of actually a more objective participant in the war and less driven by the bad ideology that you mentioned. So that much you're getting near the bullseye. But the book, no, I don't think you've read the book, unfortunately, because the book is so different than the movie and even the cartoon. Although the cartoon is closer to the book because they're in suits. The book is a great read. It's not the hints of totalitarian government that you were talking about. The book is rather different, and you kind of, I think you should just read it to learn that for yourself. But you're also really wrong about having to serve and having kids. Kids are never mentioned in any of those three different mediums: the TV show, the movie, or the book. In fact, Johnny Rico, who you follow in the book, his parents were not citizens. They were not in the military, and clearly he was born. So, like, no, like, I'm sorry, you're just so far from being correct. It's unfortunate because it's just a wonderful book, and the movie is entertaining in its own right. The children's show is fun, but the book is the best of the all three. You're also sadly very mistaken about having to serve. You want to serve in the Starship Troopers book because it makes you a citizen and you get to vote. But the book goes on to let you know as a reader that actually being able to vote is not as important as you're led to believe. It's the skills you learn in federal service, becoming a citizen, and how it affects you positively, at least in the book, right? And so you're off on so many different things. It's really unfortunate. Sometimes when people are wrong, it's like whatever, people are wrong. But the book is so good. It's unfortunate. I hope you've not read it because if you did, you don't remember it well at all. So I would encourage you or anyone else, if you like sci-fi, Starship Troopers is not like the movie. the kids TV show's a little bit more like it, but the book is really quite a masterpiece, and it's not at all as you've described it, in what seemed to be a negative way. So that's really unfortunate because that's a very good book. Let's hear again now from Doberman.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm saying this before you're playing my second message. Forgive me for the second message. More stuff, but I am very fascinated with sci-fi literature as well, and Starship Troopers. Even though I disagree with ideology, it's so interesting how people make that argument. Because in that universe, they believe that your duty, you're willing to sacrifice for the collective, means you carry the correct amount of genetics or character to continue your next generation. But yeah, that is one of the things I just wonder about. And it's really not the first time this happened before. This has happened, so it's something I am concerned about, and I'm really mostly concerned about the economic wall because, like, at least in America, it doesn't seem like healthcare is going to happen anytime soon. So, unfortunately, I think it's going to be hoarded by the wealthy.
Yeah, I can agree with the second half of that, but not the first half. Unfortunately, you don't seem to understand or have read the Starship Troopers book. There's nothing about genetics in there or character. In fact, they mention in the book that non-citizens, so people who don't serve in the military, but there's a lot of different roles you can serve federally. You don't necessarily have to be in the mobile infantry, which is basically the Navy's. The Navy are the ships, and the mobile infantry, they're like Marines. They're Space Marines. In fact, it talks about in the book how crime rates between citizens who have served and non-citizens are actually very similar. There's not that much of a difference between the two. And it leads you to believe that just the act of serving and being part of the whole, and if necessary, as you pointed out, sacrificing yourself for the whole, but not that you have to, that's never in the book, that gives someone character, and that's why only citizens can vote. So, yeah, I would encourage you to read that. My guess is for the first time, or just read it slowly for the second time, because you seem to have missed most of the value of that book. Apostate Nate, your hand is up.
So, Lee, I've never read the book Starship Troopers, although you're giving me a good sell, so it'll probably be my next audiobook selection. I actually view the movie as something of a masterpiece. I look at it in the same way, although I don't think it's quite as poignant, but I look at it through the same way that I looked through the same director, Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, which I consider to be the
Yes,
smartest
RoboCop.
sociological.
Yes. Oh,
I
yes.
consider RoboCop to be the smartest commentary on the Reagan era and America and what it meant to be an American at that time. For sure. I think Verhoeven knows what he's doing. I think there's so much rich subtext in Starship Troopers. It is one of those films, and it is a film. When I watch it, I notice something different every time, and it's such a razor sharp commentary on colonialism and its arrogance and how much tunnel vision can develop among a people, a nation, a military. Um, that it didn't do well commercially. I know that, Lee, but when I look at it alongside what happens in RoboCop, again, same director, I really see some amazing things going on in the storytelling department.
Yeah, I think the commentary in RoboCop is more slapping you in the face. It's easier to pick up on. But even RoboCop, you can watch and miss the commentary and still appreciate a fine film for the way it's put together, how realistic it is, and just the story it tells. But there's a ton of commentary in there as well. Starship Troopers has a lot of commentary, but it's not so evident and it's easier to miss. But you're right, Starship Troopers is a movie that if you watch it more and more, you pick up on more of that commentary. And yeah, it's really an enjoyable film, especially if you just watch it as a military film and stuff blowing up. But if you dig in and watch it several times, yeah, it's really cool to see how what they did on face value is not commentary, but clearly when you start connecting the dots, it is. So I will not pretend that the Starship Troopers movie is anything close to the masterpiece that the book is, because the book is so different. But yes, the movie is, I would encourage people to watch it, and watch it with the idea that it is commentary, so you pick up on that. The cartoon has, I don't know that there's a lot of commentary in the cartoon. I didn't see it all, but I've seen several episodes. I watched it as an adult because I discovered it and I'm like, oh, I want to watch this. And it's fun. It's for kids, so it's not quite the same thing as the book or the movie. But each three of them, I love Starship Troopers based media. Now, there's a bunch of movies. They made like 3 or 4 sequels, and I watched like half of one, and I'm like, oh, I'm done, because they're low budget. They're not good. I hear that some of the latter movies got better, but I was just not interested after watching the first sequel. But yes, please
They're not
read the book,
greatly.
listen to the book. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was one of those things, it's a movie and they make a sequel, and it's like, it's that's a story that's happened a bazillion times, and it's just not good. I don't think they had any theatrical releases. They were straight to video, that sort of a thing. So, but yes, a RoboCop, wonderful film that stands up to today. Starship Troopers, a wonderful book that I think has a lot of things that we can learn from today. Let's jump over here and hear from some new people. Let's hear from Nasty the MC. Nasty, take it away.
By the AI, it says genes, genetics, personality traits are something what you carry inside you from somebody else that is your mother or father in your gene pool. That's all that is. Personality traits. This has been AI.
So, that's the nature versus nurture. So there are things that can be passed genetically from parents to children that can present themselves in personality. But then there's also the, you know, siblings that are very different. The kid who was switched at birth, who's nothing like his birth parents, but really similar to the family he grew up in. I mean, there's just so many things I can point to that really disprove what you just said. But yes, there are things in our DNA that, it's all percentages. Some things are very high percentage, some things are very low percentage. But just really quickly, like, is someone born gay? Do they become gay? Most people I've met who identify as gay, um, they feel like they were born that way. It's not something that they chose. It's not something that was forced on them through some experiences they went through. Um, so these are really interesting conversations. But to just say personality traits are your DNA, I think is, as a rule, very provably false. But like with so many things, there are little grains here and there that you can point to that there are genetic markers for things. So I thought it was important to point that out. Let's hear from Nasty again.
I never read the book. The first movie was good, but other than that, trash Ola. The worst sci-fi movie franchise ever. Nope, not into it. Give me some Star Trek or something, you know what I mean? Or Intergalactic Warriors and stuff like that. Galaxy.
I really hope that final cough there is because you're enjoying some fine THC products. Not sure about that. Could have been a cough. I hope it was THC. Okay, let's jump in here, and we're going to hear from Doberman. A couple messages from Doberman, and we're wrapping up the show. We're just going to try to hear from all the messages before we end the program. Doberman.
Oh, dang. I guess I lied. Another important thing to bring up when we're talking about freedom that Pixel Pete brought up, that we can go whatever we want to do and everything. Indentured servitude's back in the United States. Like, it's called different things now, but pretty much, you take out a loan through this company. Let's say, like, you are going to nursing school and you decide to go to this one place that offers free training, right? You decide to move. You'll get a letter in the mail saying you owe this amount of money, that you've got to pay back these thousands of dollars. Matter of fact, trucking companies do it. I know they do it on Pixel Pete, that they put guys into indentured servitude where you have to work for them for a certain amount of time, or you have to pay back these thousands of dollars. You are literally a wage slave at that point. We are not the freest country in the world. The Pixel P, this was my last message because I know you're trying to get out of here. But like, dude, like, democracy is not something unique to America. That's mostly the developed world. Yes, most developed first world countries, you can find jobs, have all the same services we do, actually better. So only thing America's offering right now is our bare minimum democratic rights and not much else. While the rest of the developed world is outpacing us in education, infrastructure, all that stuff. In healthcare, life expectancy, infant mortality, you name it, dental care. It's just, freedom isn't unique, bro. It's just not.
Yeah, the general freedoms we enjoy in the United States are not unique at all. Now, certain things like guns and near absolute free speech, that is definitely a slice of Americana. But I've said it on the show, and I'll say it again now. Your average American is better off in many different countries around the world than they are here. If you're super rich, you're better off in America. Absolutely. If you're poor, you're definitely better off in other developed nations than the United States. But even middle class, the American dream, outpacing your parents, doing better than your parents did. Statistics show you're more likely to do that in the UK and I think Canada, but I'm 99% sure on the UK than the United States. It flipped sometime in the last like 30, 40 years. We went deep on this on a previous show. And so it's just some of the benefits that we did have here are no longer here. And many benefits, pretty much every other developed nation has benefits that we've never had. So I would agree with that. The general freedoms we have are not unique. And in fact, most people would be better off in other rich developed countries than they would be in the United States. But for certain things, we're still the leaders. I guess it just depends on whether or not you're willing to get screwed over on everything else to have this or have that versus going somewhere else where you probably have less freedom of speech, but you still have robust freedom of speech and you get all this other stuff too. So appreciate that comment. Let's go back to let's hear Pixel Pete. Let's get rid of all of Pixel Pete's messages that are stored up, and then we'll do Google Maps guy, and that might end the show. Pixel Pete.
People think different, and if I was in California, I probably would have voted Democrat, and you know what I mean? Because in California, everybody cares about what your neighbor thinks, and you're not gonna get invited to the party next week because you voted for Trump and shit. Like, he's a Trump supporter. Like, don't talk to him. Like, oh, he's this and that. People here in Nevada think differently. I don't know. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody minds their own business. Like, it's kind of cool. See, like, I got a student loan already owing a student loan. And if I'm not going to pay it, what are they going to do? They're going to come arrest me? No. But I mean, come on, dude. You have OSHA, you have unions, if you're overworked and stuff like that, like, there's laws against that.
There's regulations. There's people that you can go to. You can sue your company if they're overworking you. You know, and I know I'm bringing up truck driving school, but it's like we're not allowed to drive a certain amount of hours. And even like a cop can check your hours and be like, "Hey, dude, you're going over your hours," and I get fined. You know what I mean? Like there's regulations to that. I can't drive for like 48 hours straight. No, there's laws against that, and you'll get fined for that. Your company will get fined for that. You'll get fined for that. Like there's rules and regulations.
Yeah, every country has regulations on labor and things like that, but just across the board, to wrap it all up, any other rich nation, you're going to have more benefits, maybe not better pay. That would depend on the industry. And, sometimes countries, you'll have a lot more benefits, but the average pay across the entire country is lower or higher. There's a lot of things in there, but just generally, like unions and worker safety and stuff, you're better off in all the rich countries in Europe, Japan, Australia. No one has said that America does not have worker rights and does not have regulations, but we're just like we're at the high end of gun rights, we're at the low end of all those things, unfortunately. So you'd be better off in a different country. Absolutely. I'd encourage you to look that up for yourself. You don't have to trust my word for it. Let's hear more from Pixel Pete.
Like here in Nevada, no one's buying. The real estate market is really high right now. Nobody's buying. It's overpriced. That happened too because a lot of companies from California wanted to come in here and buy a bunch of property and sell those properties at California prices. So they were like, yeah, we're not going to buy. But I think there's so many factors to all this stuff. It's not one whole thing as a whole. It's like also several companies doing these type of things. And yeah, nobody's buying a house here. They're overpriced. Now, see, like this is the difference. If I went to my neighbor and he sold me a TV for $5, it's not stolen. You know what I mean? Yeah, I bought a $5 TV from the neighbor. Yeah, it's so cheap. Yeah. And then now you're claiming that I stole it from you. That's exactly what's happening.
Not sure what that is, but that appears to be this music. So we'll go ahead and stop that and try another Pixel Pete message.
Yeah, you really want to blow your own head off? Read "Do Droids Dream of Electric Sheep" by Philip K. Dick. Yeah.
I forget if I've read that one. I don't think I did. Is that what Blade Runner is based on? If it is, I have not read that one. I love sci-fi, but there are many books I have not read. So it's a classic. So I'm sure it's great, but I don't think I've read that one. Okay, now let's reassess the messages here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do final thoughts because we have a bunch of Google Maps guy messages, and I feel like I don't want to respond to these, but I'll go ahead and play them as long as they don't go too bad in one direction. So we lost Better Vibes, but he sent me a message over on Discord. It was great to have him. Haven't had him on the show in a long time. It's always great to have good friends of the show join us, as well as my supporters like Better Vibes and Apostate Nate and Lola and Shannon, Sneaky Elbow, Ron, MC Funk, and Bjorn over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. Make sure you listen, co-host, and get your voice out there more. But Apostate Nate, who's been joining us the whole show, why don't you give me your final thoughts, and then I will play the Google Maps guy messages. Probably try to forget them, and then we'll end the show. Great to have you as always, Apostate Nate. Your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think for all we've talked about today, the issue that's um, still cooking in my mind right now is the idea of stolen lands and lands back, and how much guilt should people who are the recipients of that feel. Um, I really do have to say that I empathize. I understand the complaints of the indigenous, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but I think that there's some pretty good reasons for those complaints, and even for those objections still. The problem, and I sort of view slavery reparations the same way, is I think you end up in a logistical nightmare that is almost certain to create resentment and sow the seeds of further animosity and conflict in the future. So on, there's never going to be a situation where the indigenous just have all their lands back and it was the way it was. Um, at the same time, I don't think that's an excuse to give up and turn away from their concerns and their grievances. And I think it's also, even in spite of all this, it's important to entertain discussions of perhaps more land back, and increased levels of sovereignty among their nations. I think that's fair, if not necessary. And I'll end there. Thank you, Lee.
That is an amazing final comment. Sometimes final comments are like, "Hey, it was great talking with you. Take care." But that was really great. Really wrapped up a lot of different conversations we were having and some really thought-provoking questions, hypotheticals, and consequences. So I hope that we can further this discussion on future shows. We've talked about this a lot previously, so I have no doubt that we will. All right. Well, the time has finally come. I think we're going to play 4 messages from Google Maps guy. Wish us luck. Google Maps guy, take it away. And then we'll end the show.
I'm saying if you have what's mine and you're sitting in front of me, you have the authority and the right to give it back. Let's not sugarcoat it or uh, blow it out of proportion. If you got somebody's shit and you have it, you're right in front of them. Don't say nothing about it being sold. You know that you ain't supposed to sell it or they wasn't supposed to sell it because it wasn't yours to sell. So in honor, if you have honor and some dignity, give it back or leave the Mexicans alone. I've traveled abroad. I have a passport. And I know a lot of times Mexicans and African Americans are not usually considered American unless they win a Super Bowl or throw a concert or do some kind of spectacular thing. Then you're considered American. Other than that, they're the black guy or the Mexican at the stoplight, and we need to frisk them for an investigation. You are not being judged. We're just having a debate, and I'm not calling for anybody to be expelled. I think it's a free country. It's a free planet. Everybody should be able to be here, no matter if they were born here or not. That's what I'm saying. And the only reason why you would have a problem with somebody not being here, from what I see factually, is that Mexicans outwork everybody. And since the Mexicans are outworking everybody this day and age, you feel threatened because you can't stand out in the sun. I mean, look at how many you can't do shit a Mexican can do. So, you if they outperform you, you want to get them out of the spotlight because a woman walking out of a building saying a Mexican go down or a brother going down or a Caucasian brother going down, anybody who outperforms someone else, they usually get jealous and they want.
So that's an interesting train of thought that we haven't had yet previously. So it is true that Mexican and other Latin American nationalities, they do jobs in the United States for wages and for conditions that native born Americans, white Americans, black Americans, native born Latino Americans, Hispanic Americans don't want to do. And that's because we've grown up in a situation where we feel like that's not the right compensation or that's not the working conditions that we are willing to accept for the job compensation. That happens in every country. And so you're absolutely right. A lot of immigrants to the United States, both people who come here legally and people who come here illegally or come legally and overstay, that grace that we gave them, allowing them to come into our country, they work their asses off. But that is also not something unique to the United States. And so one of the consequences of that is that it can keep wages down and it can keep worker rights down and it can negatively affect other industries, other sectors, other parts of a country aside from that specific job or even just employment in general. And so it's always a balancing act. You have big projects, you're building infrastructure. The United States is not the only country that continues to, or within our lifetime, has depended on labor from outside the country, either legally or illegally. But you have to weigh all the consequences of that. And I didn't hear that in your message. So, yes, I agree with you. People who come to this country work very hard. A lot of people who are from this country work very hard. It goes back to my saying of what you get and how you're treated is often, if not damn near always, better in other rich countries than the United States. We are not a country that takes worker rights and compensation as seriously as nearly everybody else in the developed world. So we have some common ground here. I appreciate that comment, but I think you're missing out on the effects that can be undesirable, not only for the people who were born here, who are American born and raised, but also the people who are working those jobs. If you work a job because you need the money and you're from a place that you don't want to go back to, you'll probably put up with a lot of things. But if you were collective as a union or just collective as some sort of other group and you demanded better wages and better working conditions, that could have some positive effect for not only you, but everyone else. And that's actually the history of labor in most countries. So if you just accept that a lot of people that come to this country are very hardworking and don't talk about the consequences of that, in some ways good, some ways bad, I think you're missing a lot of that history and a lot of the current situations that we're finding ourselves in the United States and elsewhere in the world. Okay. Let's go back to Google Maps guy.
That's why I said if you don't see the value in taking out the Europeans, and if you don't see the value in taking out the Mexicans or the Indians, leave the Mexicans alone. They ain't bothering nobody. They're just trying to live like everybody else. And if you can't agree with that, yeah, like I said, there's no honor amongst thieves. When you outsource responsibility to another country, nation, or person, it is not a family business anymore. It may be family run, but eventually the person will say, well, what do I need you for? So the value of the dollar is subject to who puts in the work or who kills for it. In other words, you can't really see somebody holding up a dollar that even the person with the button that says print on it that pushes it doesn't even want to do that. It's like, dude, you are lazy, you don't want to do shit, and you white label everything. Just because it has a white label on it doesn't mean you can't use a black marker and say who really owns what you're labeling. It is factual that labor is worth more than the money that most of the people who run the businesses are paying. So do your own shit, or we should need you. We should sell our own time and make our own money. And we should make what they think they are bosses get out and do it themselves. They need to be humbled, I think. They didn't need money when all this shit started. So get off the pesos, bro. Can't do, not don't want to do. They can't do them because of, training. You get out there and do it. You can do it. If you don't do it, you can't do it. You're good at what you don't do. It will only affect Americans of different cultures in America because they will have to do the work themselves and they can't compete. That is the effect it would have on those classes, left or right people. Dude, you don't even sound like you work hard. You got a radio show. I'm talking about the person who moved all the furniture in your.
All right, we got a few more Google Maps guy voice messages, but I'm going to go ahead and not play them. Unfortunately, Google Maps guy's messages at first, while they were like really, wow, look at that, something to talk about. It's just I don't know, like I don't get why you attack me. I've gone out of my way to include you in the show, especially when some of the messages you send like could have been one message instead of four messages. And I just to be completely honest, I don't like the way that you treat people when you have a conversation. So I hope you can join the show in the future and you treat people with more respect. Um, and maybe that'll be the case. Maybe it won't be the case. But I would ask you in the future. I've shown you a lot of grace. I've shown you a lot of respect for, as you know, very alarming things that you have said, and you have not shown that to me as the show has gone on. So I appreciate the contribution you made to the show. Thank you for sharing your opinions with us. But please do it in a more respectful way in the future. And then everyone can do that. And hopefully we'll have a productive show. So hopefully a learning opportunity for you. I really appreciate everybody else who's been part of the show today. It's been a great show. It was a lot longer than I expected. We went 3.5 hours. Please follow the show wherever you're listening. Please go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate. That's bit.ly/NEWZ debate. And follow me on Rumble and Twitch. Join our Discord server. And if you have a few extra bucks and you like the content, and especially if you want to be more on the show, be like a co-host, like Better Vibes and Apostate and Work Today over on Twitter Spaces. We can also do that on stereo. Consider supporting the show on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. It has been a pleasure. It has been a lot of fun. I do this show in my own time. Don't really make any money off of it. So having people be a part of the show in a respectful way, and also the few people who throw me a few bucks every month over on Patreon makes it all worthwhile. So really appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'll probably do another show about a week from now or something. I'll post it on Twitter and I'll post it on my Discord server. And until then, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.